Chapter 9:11 The Witch and God _2. With a snort, Zephyrus immediately knew who the visitor was. There were no other possibilities, only that impertinent fellow. Although he indeed had to thank the other party for successfully escaping the endless examination and acquiring a temporary identity, in other respects he would never compromise. As a god, even though he had momentarily transformed into a bird, Zephyrus believed he had his principles. Moreover, she was unaware of his true identity. Otherwise, even scare tactics alone could have killed her. Humph! I had heard that the people of Silver Moon City are arrogant and rude, and now it seems to be true. Once I leave this place, I'll definitely make you pay. Flapping his wings, Zephyrus then flew onto a nearby windowsill, because he knew that some people do not use the door. Click, whoosh! Just after he positioned himself, the originally closed crystal window opened by itself. A bitter blast of air hit his face, causing Zephyrus's feathers to be blown about in disarray. Even without using his authority, such a degree of airflow should absolutely not affect this body, as if cherished by the rules of the wind. But since arriving in this city, in order to ensure his identity remained undisclosed, the god of West Wind had always restrained his instincts. The incoming airflow was swift and brief, and when it ended, the bird that Zephyrus had transformed into raised its head. However, just as he looked outward, in the eyes of the god of West Wind, a large hand came following. Gah! Let go of me. You're violating the rights I possess as a holder of a temporary identity. I am not your pet. You have no right to manhandle me. His feathers bristled violently. Zephyrus struggled desperately. Finally freeing himself from the large hand that had grabbed him, the bird flew into the mid-air. And not far away, the witch looked on amused. She sat sideways on a forked wooden stick, her robe parted from the bottom, revealing a pair of fair long legs. Her pointed soft hat was crookedly placed on her head, and a silver ornament hung from her right ear. Like a witch from a fairy tale come to reality, only missing a magic wand to grant wishes. However, as a creature born and bred in chaos, Zephyrus couldn't appreciate this blending of fantasy and reality. You learn quite quickly. I didn't expect you to fail in actually useful knowledge but memorize the regulations so clearly. If it were someone else, they might even think you grew up as a native in Silver Moon City. Covering her mouth with a light laugh, looking at the gray sparrow busily preening its feathers, even Medea herself felt somewhat surreal at this moment. She remembered the first time she decided to take action personally after dealing with those folks in the council. She was very nervous. After all, in the past, although Silver Moon City had encountered deities, the ones they dealt with were often extremely polarized. They were either the goddess of the magic net or at least the master of the wilderness who possessed a real divine artifact. Their powers were almost all among the most powerful deities, and with the power projected from the magic net and spirit realm moon, no one dared to question their authority. Besides them, the only other deities they dealt with were territorially gods with pitiful combat strength. Sadly, from ancient times till now, territorially gods who were chopped dead in anger by human heroes were numerous. Whether it was humans or true gods, even they themselves didn't really consider themselves as gods. Without the transformation of authority, even if possessing some minor divine power, these territorial gods rarely could match half-god heroes. Thus, when Medea first prepared for a close encounter with a true deity, possibly even a figure akin to a principal god, she had made countless preparations secretly and openly. Using her position as the keeper of mystery locks for personal gains, she enhanced local power at the expense of overall efficiency, activated forbidden witchcraft to sever portions of flesh and soul to store, planning to use them as her anchor for resurrection if an accident occurred. Moreover, she also covertly manipulated accounts for personal benefit, secretly preparing 7 secret treasure vaults across the southern continent and cracked some of the clock tower's programs, getting ready to whisk away an entire high tower. After all, if a situation arose, whether she could escape with her life was unclear, but a significant loss in her own strength was certain. Chapter 9:12 Witch and God _3. If Medea were to set off such an enormous bomb in Silver Moon City, Even if she ultimately managed to suppress it, she would likely instantaneously transform from one of the 12 highly esteemed Tower Masters into a most wanted criminal, pursued across the whole city for heinous crimes. Thus, to prevent this worst-case scenario from happening, to avoid becoming a condemned prisoner, Medea simply treated everyone as potential enemies in advance. If nothing happened, then naturally all would be well. With her abilities, quietly balancing the books would be both easy and enjoyable. But if problems arose, she wouldn't need others to come to her. She would take off herself. She, Medea, was beyond anyone's judgment. TSKS. The only pity is that, after all my preparations, the one thing I didn't foresee was that this god seems to have a rather non-functional brain. Maybe the rumors are wrong, or perhaps he is an exception. Anyhow, based on the various descriptions of the Sea Emperor and War God, Goddess of Beauty and Heavenly Empress in the records, deities don't seem to be paragons of emotional stability either. They are like humans, only undying, those so-called nobly born humans. Even among the few with stable emotions, they don't seem this foolish. As deities with true foresight, neither the divine king nor the goddess of wisdom would likely be fooled by our little tricks. For some reason, after the initial shock passed, Medea stopped pondering further. No matter what, the being before her was definitely a god, and the fact that he was unexpectedly well-behaved was also true. Since the outcome was favorable, there was no need to dwell on it any further. Aside from occasional flare-ups of her thrill-seeking nature, Medea felt that everything about her encounter with this deity was going well. Chirp! Just so you know, I have the rules and regulations of Silver Moon City memorized by heart. If you continue to act so recklessly, I'll go to the temple's judge to report you. Unaware of what the witch before him had thought about in such a short time, Zephyrus had finally managed to regain his normal composure. Flapping his wings, he cautiously created distance between himself and the other party. It would be too regrettable to ruin his efforts over such a trifle. Thus, to prevent this human's boundless behavior, Zephyrus could only choose to stay away. Chirp! Speak! What are you here for? What do you guess? With arched brows and eyes, Medea smiled as she asked. Ha! Who knows what you're thinking? I warn you, as a human who has lived nearly 1,000 years, you're considered an elder among your kind. Some things are simply impossible. Even if I starve to death, jumping from here, I would never sign some ridiculous magic pet contract with you. That's Chirp! Loudly proclaiming his principles, however, seeing the witch's suddenly changing expression, Zephyrus felt that something was amiss. He had forgotten. Unlike deities, many humans don't take pride in living long, and some even feel annoyed by it. Apologizing for his own blunder in this matter, Zephyrus felt truly sorry. However, as a god, even though the so-called magic pet contract couldn't really restrain him, he definitely wouldn't sign it. Previously, Zephyrus had actually reviewed the contract. It must be said, it was indeed an extremely clever design. With a very small price, it could achieve a strong bind. Unlike the Nether River Oath, which is a vow supported by law, this contract used between mortals is fundamentally rooted in bloodlines and spirit. To mortals, such a constraint that pierces both flesh and soul is indeed solid enough. However, the bodies of deities and mortals are vastly different. Deities are inherently able to freely transform between material and spirit, with the purest divine nature both arising from and superior to both. Thus, for deities, such contracts are not enduring. It's like having a stamp on one's body, apparently obvious. But if you wash it, it will fall off. Even just by knowing the method, a deity could turn the contract into a unilateral agreement. But considering the main subject of the contract is already biased towards humans, such unilaterality is rather meaningless. In this light, Zephyrus didn't really need to refuse the agreement. After all, it couldn't cause any harm. However, the ability to wash off is one thing, while the fact of having been stamped is another issue entirely. Undoubtedly, even though his time in Silver Moon City has changed him a lot, in some ways Zephyrus still has his limits. His eyes shifting slightly, the god of West Wind gave the matter some silent thought. In a flash, Zephyrus flew toward the bustling parts of the city. Though he found this human quite detestable, thanks to her, he no longer needed to face those loathsome test questions. Even after receiving a provisional identity, he could take a tour within a limited scope. He had previously lacked a proper reason, which meant Zephyrus had never strayed too far from his place of residence. Now, well, since he had found the opportunity, he might as well go and have a look. Chapter 9:13. Secret Chamber. Whoosh! With a single breath, Zephyrus flew a long distance, still glancing back in the process. It was somewhat unexpected that the woman did not catch up even after he was out of sight. The human, who had no sense of distance, simply made a knocking gesture towards him and then let him leave freely. For a moment, Zephyrus felt oddly unaccustomed to this freedom. What was this situation? Could it be that his threat had worked? Perhaps that was the case, as humans here seemed quite deterred by the godhood practitioners who swore justice before deity. But despite what he said, Zephyrus knew very well that he wouldn't really seek help from the judges like the locals here. Jokingly, although mortals misunderstood him a lot, most of the Olympian gods pretended to be unaware. But as the god of West Wind who had lived long enough, how could he not be aware of what this place was? Here, to Zephyrus, the godhood practitioner was actually the most daunting presence. But then again, I found an opportunity to leave, but where should I go now? Landing casually on a building, he finally gained the freedom to move around the city, but Zephyrus felt a bit lost for a while. Initially, he was here to look for Heracles, but now, even he wasn't quite sure what he wanted to do. Seriously speaking, life here wasn't too bad either. Shaking his head, as soon as the thought rose, Zephyrus quickly dismissed it. It's easy to switch from frugality to luxury, but hard the other way around. Having lived so long, how could he forget what this world was like? In the entire chaos, he is one of the few deities who had seen all the great ones. Even the mysterious Mother Night, Zephyrus had once spied on in secret. The more he saw, the more he realized his own insignificance. Still burdened with an order from the God King, how could he stop here? Sigh! He exhaled lightly, a rare serious expression appearing on the face of the gray-feathered sparrow. Heracles, we've been apart for too long. Although I don't know what you are doing here, it's time for you to come back. Let me see where you are now, and then guide you back to the right path. Once again ensuring no one was following him, Zephyrus focused to sense his surroundings. Using the mark he had left earlier, he tried to calculate his current position. Perhaps because of Silver Moon City's mystery lock fluctuated with the heavenly bodies like the tides. After sensing for a long time, Zephyrus felt that something was a bit off about this direction. This location. How did he get there? Clueless, Zephyrus naturally didn't know much about the city, as he hadn't had the chance to move freely before. But even just from the occasional bits of conversation, the god of West Wind had roughly sketched out a map in his mind. Aside from a few key landmarks, he had remembered most of the areas where the indigenous people and outsiders moved because that was also one of his best routes for leaving Silver Moon City. If he were to be discovered by accident, the humans here would need to consider whether it was wise to anger a deity in the most crowded places. But at this moment, sensing the location of the mark, Zephyrus was somewhat puzzled. From the direction, that place was not where most people frequented, nor was there anything special there. It was just an unfinished city sector that reportedly had a history of hundreds of years. According to the records of the humans here, they had once thought of expanding on the base of Silver Moon City itself before deciding to venture to the outside world. However, due to various factors, this expansion was ultimately cancelled, and the uncompleted city area was left abandoned. If one had to say what was there, then it would probably just be a long-abandoned temple. Of course, since it had never been used from the beginning, it might not be quite right to call it abandoned. That kind of place, what was he going there for? The god of West Wind didn't know the answer, but since it wasn't a forbidden land, he decided to go check it out. For the locals, that was a forbidden wasteland. But for him, as long as he didn't cause any disturbance, there was no difference where he went. Flap, flap. Controlling his flying height, he headed north. Carefully avoiding various alchemy equipment, Zephyrus's speed wasn't very fast. As an outsider with no significant standing, his previous whereabouts were not in a central area. So flying along the way, the god of West Wind encountered no trouble. The sun slowly moved across the sky, and shadows on the ground rotated accordingly. Following the guidance of the mark, Zephyrus navigated through the buildings. Crossing a river in the city, the gray sparrow flew into the abandoned city sector. It seemed that no one had been here for a long time as there was a thin layer of dust on the ground. However, the deeper inside he went, the more hesitant the god of West Wind's expression became. Because construction had never officially started, most of the buildings here were never built up. Only the initially designated temple stood out like a crane among chickens in the center, easily visible at a glance. Yet from Zephyrus's perception, the direction his mark was guiding seemed to be right there. As he got closer, however, the guidance started to tilt downward. Similar to a compass, when it is far away, it only shows the cardinal directions. Only when you get close do you start using it to distinguish between higher and lower horizontal positions. The mark of the god of West Wind was just like that, and the final guided location was actually below the abandoned temple. What does this mean, an abandoned temple? Perhaps this place actually hides some secrets of Silver Moon City, and Heracles discovered it, hence being imprisoned by the people here. Flap, flap. With a heavy look, an invisible wind circled around Zephyrus, informing him of the situation inside the temple. However, there was nothing there. Beneath its grand and dignified appearance was just an empty shell. There were no statues, no godhood practitioners, and not even the expected guards or secret passages. No matter how one looked at it, this was a building that had never been put to use. Hovering in the air for 2 circles, Zephyrus felt hesitant in his heart. If it were not for Heracles, he had no desire to explore any secrets. But as the son of the god king carries some thoughts of Zeus, as a deity of Olympus, no matter what, the god of West Wind must safely escort him out of this city. Swoosh! Flying into the temple, Zephyrus observed carefully. In his perception, this place appeared so ordinary. The floor was solid, and the surrounding walls had no interlayers. His gaze sharpening, following the sensation of a mark, the wings of the gray sparrow became as hard as divine iron and then fiercely slashed downwards. The next moment, the floor, which seemed without any issues, was torn apart on the spot. And just below it, a dark hole was revealed. Whoosh! Divine light flickered. Having arrived here, Zephyrus no longer masked his presence. The sparrow's appearance began to distort and transform, and after a few moments, a human figure appeared inside the spacious temple hall. Having reverted to his original form, the god of West Wind leaped down towards the entrance of the hole. Ha! This floor, is it the technology of humans? Just like the transformation of a deity, even though it's right in front of me, I cannot discern its authenticity. But it doesn't matter anymore. They placed this location in such a secluded area, and didn't even install any surveillance devices. What exactly are they trying to do? And Heracles? Bang! After falling for a while, Zephyrus's feet once again touched the ground. The entire way down was unobstructed, which was to be expected. The more ordinary something is, the better it is concealed. If there were indeed any traps containing power set underground, Zephyrus would have detected them. But the real arrangement here seems to not be meant for defense, but for concealment. If it weren't for his own mark as a guide, perhaps no one could find the abnormalities beneath. Step, step, ses, surrounded by darkness, yet it didn't affect the god of West Wind's vision. Surveying his surroundings, at this moment, Zephyrus found himself in a long stone corridor. The place he landed was the starting point. The end was still unknown. Stepping forward, as if receiving some signal, a series of candle flames along the corridor lit up one after another. Each bronze lamp full of patterns. Light gold oil turned into fuel for burning. The smell of burning in the air did not have the foul stench of ordinary animal fats, but instead carried a faint, pleasant fragrance. Taking big strides forward, Zephyrus continued along the corridor. Although he himself hadn't expected to discover such a thing, now that he was here, there was no possibility of turning back. Step, step. From the moment he broke through the ground above, an invisible air current had been muffle all pathways of sound transmission. Whatever was inside, for them it was impossible to hear Zephyrus entering. Once again turning himself into an invisible stream of air, the god of West Wind once more used one of his best tricks. It's also why many of his deeds remain unknown otherwise. Zephyrus felt he would eventually become a deity managed by chaos, specializing in hiding and disguising. The location indicated by the mark is probably here. Heracles, what exactly are you doing here? What is this? How is this possible? Not knowing how long he had walked, at some point, the invisible air current rounded a bend. It seemed to be the end of the corridor, and as he turned this corner, Zephyrus's vision suddenly widened. A massive underground space, big enough to fit half of an outside city-state, and the exit of the corridor was just right in midair. To have such a space beneath an abandoned temple was in itself enough to shock. However, the god of West Wind had anticipated this, and even though he was surprised, his reaction wasn't overly dramatic. This? A pit for 1,000 people or 10,000 people? Zephyrus didn't know. Within this vast space, countless white bones were piled below, divided into blocks by patches of soil. Thick bone dust settled below, adding a touch of chill to this place. But what truly made the god of West Wind unable to restrain his emotions was the location of his mark. Right in a pit made up of countless white bones, attached to its master, it seemed to be one of the skeletons. For a moment Zephyrus thought Heracles had died. But the feeling of anger was fleeting, and he quickly realized. That was not Heracles, there was no trace of the blood of God King on that skeleton. It was a problem with his own mark. Buzz. Who? Seemingly due to the emotional turbulence just now, which caused a leak of his aura, Zephyrus realized there were others here. Looking up abruptly, he gazed towards the center of this space. Candlelight as bright as day, white bones like mounds. Surprised once again, at the center of this space was not a human, but rather a Chapter 9:14 Blood Feast. Bones piled high, a faint glimmer of fire. In the vast underground space, an unbelievable name was uttered in a low voice. Gazing at everything before him, Zephyrus never imagined that beneath Silver Moon City he would encounter him. Astrius, the ancestor of the stars, a Titan deity of the olden times. He was the son of the meteorology titan Crius, the grandson of the ancient sea god Pontus, and the forefather of all current star gods. At the onset of the second epoch, he and the goddess of dawn together birthed the myriad stars and the four wind gods. Hence, during the second epoch, the star gods were divided, each following the divine king and the sun. As for the change in divine kingship, the god of meteorology was imprisoned in Tartarus, while the sea power Eurybia returned to the coastal waters, placed under the watchful contemplation of her elder brother Nereus. Deprived of his two greatest sources of support and failing to defect to Zeus's side early on, Astrius found himself in an awkward position. Olympus had no place for him, especially since Zephyrus, although he had earned Zeus's trust through the offering of the wheat-gold scepter, was never particularly close to him. To call them father and son was more akin to being colleagues under the same command. Whereas among the stars, although the ancient sun god was no longer present, the status of the Mother of Light remained unshakable as ever. One thing leading to another, combined with his rather ordinary strength, Astrius was forced to distance himself from the human world. There were many Titan deities like him, mostly those with mediocre power who had not joined Olympus in time. From this perspective, the luck and choices Zephyrus had made were quite fortuitous already. Compared to his contemporaries, most gods of his era had already faded from the world's center. What seemed like a long while was actually just a moment. As thoughts of Astrius flickered through his mind, the steady hum resounded again, and Zephyrus immediately locked onto the source of the sound. In the center of this underground space, surrounded by endless bones, stood a towering altar. Its structure was similar to the sacrificial platforms mortal humans used to worship deities, yet upon closer inspection, there were a few differences. Not only because on the altar was not a godly statue, but a deity himself, but also due to the intricate ducts and a network of faint silver running through the body. From the altar, from the void, extending from Astrius himself, the intricate network diverged, ultimately binding the being on the altar. The continuous rumble was not caused by anything else but the collision between the god of the stars and what bound him. "Are you calling to me?" Stepping forward, Zephyrus noticed that the Astrius upon the altar seemed to still have a conscious mind. He appeared to sense Zephyrus's arrival and was trying to draw his attention. Without hesitation, the god of West Wind leapt forward. Although relationship was average, as a member of the deities, Zephyrus could not just stand by and watch someone be imprisoned by humans here. This was a taboo amongst the gods, and something every deity would invariably do. Like the last mortal who did this, Sisyphus, even today, he is still endlessly pushing a boulder. Swoosh! Leaving the corridor, beneath his feet was a pit buried with countless bones, the invisible airflow lifting the wind god forward. However, just as he began, Zephyrus's complexion slightly changed. For some unknown reason, as soon as he arrived above the pile of bones, a nameless force began to act on him, trying to extract his blood and spirit. The deeper he went, the more intense the extraction became. At the same time, almost visible to the naked eye, the grid near the central altar became brighter, and the god of West Wind in midair was caught in a dilemma. He did not know if he could continue forward, whether he could still resist this power without relying on his divine power. And this sensation was so foreign yet familiar. Zephyrus was certain he had seen it before, more than once, but couldn't recall it at the moment. Hovering in midair, his expression was extremely serious. "Ha! Don't come closer." "What?" Suddenly lifting his head, with the help of the air surrounding him, Zephyrus actually heard Astrius's voice. And the next moment, the god of the stars realized this as well. Within the faint silver grid, the deity's eyes, as thin as skeletons, flashed with a glimmer of hope. "You can hear? Leave quickly. This is a blood sacrifice. You can't save me, just by yourself. Leave. Get out of here. Tell everything here to all gods. Otherwise, my present will be your tomorrow." The voice was so faint it was almost non-existent, but Zephyrus heard the towering hatred within. The other party wanted him to leave, which was understandable, as he himself was likely the only hope Astrius had seen in hundreds of years. If even Zephyrus fell here, that would perhaps be the true despair for Astrius. However, even though he realized this, the god of West Wind did not want to just walk away. Blood sacrifice, yes. After the reminder from the god of the stars, Zephyrus finally remembered what this familiar sensation was. Mortals made sacrificial offerings of blood to the gods, and he just now had played the role of a sacrifice. Not just him, who happened to stumble here, but perhaps the millions of bones in this underground void all came from this. That mortal who had gotten his mark by some misfortune had become an unfortunate sacrifice, turning into the blood food for the blood sacrifice to the god of the stars. But why? Using living beings as sacrifices was expressly forbidden by Zeus, and even the brutal Ares only dared to circumvent it by using the excuse of gladiatorial combat. Yet all before him proved that beneath the civilized foundations of Silver Moon City, there had been such a large and ongoing living sacrifice. The pile of bones in the pit clearly showed varying ages of death, and their subject of blood sacrifice was, in fact, an imprisoned god. Madmen, a blood sacrifice to a deity. Could these humans not be afraid that he may resist at all costs? No, looking at his condition, if there was a chance, no matter the cost, he probably would have already made a desperate attempt. Taking a deep breath, Zephyrus vaguely guessed something, but subconsciously he didn't want to believe it. How could a noble deity fall to such a fate at the hands of humans? Retreating back to the elevated platform, with the entrance corridor behind him. With Astrius's warning in place, the god of West Wind did not intend to delve any deeper, but this did not mean that he would just leave. He ultimately needed an outcome for the events that transpired here. Astrius, I will find someone to rescue you. But before that, you must tell me, what exactly have you been through? Who trapped you here? What did they do? And what are their goals? And most importantly, besides humans, are there any deities involved in this matter? His expression grave, the god of West Wind was even more tense in his heart. He wanted to know the answers to the previous questions, but they weren't that important. Only the last one was key. As a deity, he did not believe that other gods would support humans in doing such a thing, but there were always exceptions. What if, just what if, and what if that very exception was the deity worshipped by Silver Moon City? After all, this underground space was conveniently located right here, beneath the desecrated temple. In such a situation, Zephyrus could not help but feel on edge. Fortunately, at the next moment, when Astrius's voice resounded, the god of West Wind breathed a sigh of relief at the bottom of his heart. I know what you're thinking. There are no deities involved here. Not even the goddess of the magic net. Good. Somewhat relieved, the greatest threat was non-existent, making things much easier to deal with. However, if no deities are involved, then how exactly had these mortals managed to imprison Astrius? Curious, Zephyrus posed the question. Hey, Zephyrus, you underestimate their despicability. On your way here, did you see the oil lamps? You've guessed it, right? Ha cough cough cough. Watching the suddenly silent god of West Wind, Astrius in the center of the altar revealed a crazed smile on his skeleton-like face. It looked like crying and laughing, but without a single tear. After a while, the god of the stars slowly revealed the truth. Yes, cough cough cough, just as you've guessed. Those are oil lamps, but they are divine oil lamps. As a primordial deity, my godhood brings me divine power all the time, and as long as I have sufficient divine power, these humans cannot contain me. Standing at the entrance of the corridor, Zephyrus was momentarily lost for words. He indeed had guessed it before Astrius had even spoken. But his subconscious actually did not want to believe that a true god would truly face such a calamity. True gods are undying. This is the iron law of chaos. And their divine power is directly derived from the corresponding laws themselves, never to run dry. In such a situation, the so-called eternal slumber, though terrifying for chaos's gods, is exceedingly difficult to achieve. Even a territorial god, no matter how weak, as long as the mountains and rivers corresponding to their divine authority exist, they will not fall into slumber. Since the dawn of creation to the present, the long slumbers of true gods were either from backlash from the laws themselves or their own choice. So in such a case, even if mortals accidentally captured a deity, how would they ensure that it would not rise up in rebellion after restoration? Exhaustion, that's all they can do. At the beginning, I expended all my strength during the chaos of Typhon. These humans found me, and then secretly brought me back. At first, they just thought I was a god of stars. Until later, they realized who I was. So they feared me. No, they feared the gods. Buzz. The sound abruptly intensified, triggering a reaction from the pale silver grid, firmly locking Astrius down. Pain intermixed with the previously fierce expression on the face of the god of the stars, before being forced to calm down. After a long time, seemingly driven a bit mad by the prolonged agony, the deity again raised his head, staring directly at where Zephyrus was. Heh! Heh! Zephyrus? They fear me, yet they desire me. They don't want to let go of me, yet they are afraid of my power. So this is the only way. By bringing my body to the brink of death, extracting blood, bones, fat, organs one by one. These are the materials they study. They also serve as tools to limit my recovery of divine power. Now, do you understand? There was no response, nor was one needed. Zephyrus certainly understood, and he was now clear-headed. In the short time he stayed in Silver Moon City, he almost thought it wasn't too bad. Even though he couldn't compare with Mount of the Gods in status, What he experienced here was something he had never seen on Olympus. All of this had caused the god of West Wind to develop some fondness for the city. But the fact proves that humans are just humans. The more ignorant they are, the more devout they become. The more wise they are, the more sacrilegious they become. The divine king warned all gods. This is the nature of humans, but only now do I truly realize it. Wizards should not exist. From the human perspective, how they view their kin engaging in human sacrifices in the shadows, Zephyrus was not clear. But from the standpoint of a deity, all of this before his eyes was unequivocally a sin. Chapter 9:15, Blood of the Stars. Southeast continent, above Silver Moon City. Surrounding the city core and the mystery lock, 12 clock towers hang high above as always. Whether day or night, through storms or clear skies, they forever maintain their eternal trajectory. This is a masterpiece of witchcraft, and a testament to the power of the goddess of the magic net. Because it is not only man-made, it is also a gift from the gods. Indeed, while the spellcasters of Silver Moon City pride themselves on their exceptional skill, there are some things they must acknowledge. That is, the founder of alchemy was not among their self-proclaimed wise, but a seeker from afar. And the reason these 12 towers are so special is not that the technology they contain is so powerful. After all, time levels everything, and perhaps at the time the first tower rose, it indeed was an unparalleled miracle of its age. But from the earliest of these towers hanging in the sky to the present day, nearly 1,000 years have passed in Silver Moon City. In this era without civilization gaps, in the realm of witchcraft, ancient does not equate to powerful. On the contrary, among the humans in the age of gods, the newer things are, the more extraordinary they often appear. So, Erwin, this is the difference between humans and deities. To humans, new creations often outshine the old. Because our strength comes from wisdom and creation, the future will always triumph over the past. But for deities, the old often surpasses the new. Because their power comes from the world itself, the past will always triumph over the future. Just like a pre-cut cake, when it is laid out on the table naturally, the ones who served first eat the most, while the latecomers get but a meager share. However, the gold mine buried in the ground belongs solely to the one who unearths it. As long as you are good at digging and seeking, it doesn't matter when you arrive. Thud thud. The deep-colored oak staff struck the ground, making a dull sound. Standing by the window and looking down at the city below, the elder with sparse and grayed hair couldn't help but sigh. Looking out, within Silver Moon City, the bustling crowds and flickering magic lights shimmer like stars laid upon the ground. Truly, it's young and vibrant, generation after generation. I am indeed old. With a slight shake of his head, the elder gently sighed. He still remembered what he looked like when he was young in that year, as the first-generation offspring born of Bronze Age remnants and water elves. He and his friends played together by Falling Star Lake. Back then, Silver Moon City still appeared desolate and primitive, but under the guidance of the great prophet, everyone was full of hope for the future. In the blink of an eye, so many years have passed. The hopes of the people back then have all been realized one by one. Wilderness turned into farmlands, the sky is occupied by the creations of humans, and he, of course, is no longer young. After all, being human, one will inevitably age, and I, of course, cannot escape my later years. So, Erwin, enjoy your young body while you can. With a smile, the elder pointed his staff at the middle-aged man behind him. Unlike me, you've only lived for a few hundred years and have a long future ahead of you. Experience the sensation of youth while you can, because when your day comes, no matter how much knowledge you have, no matter how glorious your honors, you cannot change your soul that is slowly decaying. Magic might delay the decay of the body, but who can change the continuation of a soul that is complete and vibrant? It is not difficult to extend one's life, at least not for the elder himself. But to prolong life without affecting one's emotions and integrity is as hard as reaching the heavens. The elder knew that maybe in 100 years, perhaps 200, at most not more than 300, he is destined to start on the road to death. To mortals, this might already be long enough, but for him, it's just the last glow before life's fire extinguishes. Teacher, you are exaggerating. Your life has just begun. How could it possibly come to an end? Slightly bending over, the middle-aged man known as Erwin smiled respectfully. Deep blue robes draped over his body, with a complex and exquisite floral pattern etched onto his left chest. That is the symbol of the clock tower, and Medea owns an identical one. It symbolizes that its owner has reached the pinnacle within the domain of spellcasters, the master of one of those 12 towers. Yet in front of his teacher, the middle-aged man's attitude remained as ever, as though he was still the apprentice of the past. Just as you said, the greatness of humanity lies in wisdom and creation. In the Bronze Age, humans regarded transcendence as the prerogative of gods, but now it has become widespread in the mortal realm. So nothing is absolute. Perhaps one day in the future, the crown of the secret to eternal life will be rightfully placed upon your head. The crown of immortality. All right, Erwin, you know how difficult that is. Shaking his head with a smile, the elder did not take his student's words to heart. The greater the hope, the greater the disappointment. When he first started researching, he also believed that he only lacked the opportunity for experiments to be successful. But after really getting started, he realized just how minute he was. The gap between gods and humans is as wide as chasms, just like these 12 clock towers. Only someone like the elder, who had participated in their construction, knows that their true strength never lies within themselves but in the divine grace that envelopes this place. Mystery Lock, the supreme miracle born under the will of the gods. Chapter 9:16. Blood of the Stars _2. Its existence warped the magic net, semi-permanently altering the rules of an entire region, or perhaps, it was in fact the twisted magic net itself. The revered master of 10,000 laws created it, creating what humans to this day cannot fully understand. And then, like discarding garbage, he handed over the authority to manage it to the humans of Silver Moon City. Since that day, the construction schedule for the 12 high towers had begun. But in reality, in terms of the sheer technology of building high towers alone, it probably still couldn't match that great alchemist from Athens. It's such a pity that young man was unwilling to stay. Otherwise, with his talent, these difficult problems that trouble us might not be so insurmountable. Thinking of this, the elder also felt some regret. In his long life, that young man named Hermes was arguably the most talented and creative person he had ever seen. Before him, Silver Moon City only had rune studies, material studies, magic potion study. After him, people began to interpret the world from a different angle, using equivalent exchange as the foundation, explaining transcendent through the perspective of alchemy. Are you referring to Hermes? His expression slightly shifting, standing behind the elder, Erwin's face didn't look too good upon hearing that name. Hermes, he remembered this fellow. Unlike Medea, this Athenian was not a demigod, and there was no blood of all gods within him. So at first, Erwin also felt quite favorable towards Hermes. Only later, he may indeed have had some abilities, but his personality was too unpleasant. Teacher, everyone has their own choices, and to recruit him, we had already made an exception at that time. Even at the end, I personally promised him that if he chose to stay, then even if he did not grow up in Silver Moon City, one day he could become the master of a clock tower, and perhaps one day have the opportunity to study the eternal secret. He cannot be unaware of what I was saying, but teacher, he still mercilessly rejected me. Let it be, it's in the past. Slightly shaking his head, although the old man still harbored some regret. Like he himself said, after all, it was already in the past. Besides, at times he also wondered if he had overestimated the other party. The unknown is always the most alluring, so whenever he encountered difficulties in research, the old man couldn't help but think, what would it have been like if that young man with exceptional talent were here? Especially as the other party's reputation grew louder, his regret grew as well. But after all, it is very difficult to judge a person's talent. A genius who pioneered alchemy might not possess the same talent in other areas. Standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of the high tower, the elder chatted with his student for a while. As time passed, his demeanor couldn't hide his fatigue. This was not physical exhaustion, nor could it be changed by the strength of the mortal world. "Teacher, if you're tired, I'll take my leave first." Noticing this scene, the middle-aged man was about to excuse himself. However, just at that moment, the sound of a bell suddenly rang out. Ding-ling. Hearing this crisp sound, the middle-aged man immediately fell silent and stopped. He took a half-step back, revealing a flash of understanding in his eyes. "This is exactly what you're thinking. After many years of effort, we have finally achieved some results. It's just that there are still too few finished products now, and the effects are much worse than expected." Speaking calmly, the old man who also heard the bell felt rejuvenated. A flicker of hope passed through his eyes as he tapped his cane on the floor. As if by a command, the floor of the room immediately opened to reveal a hole leading somewhere unknown. The next moment, a platform rose sluggishly from within. There wasn't much on it. On the platform was a silver tray, and on it, placed a crystal bottle filled with a brilliant golden liquid that flowed like quicksand. Tiny dazzling spots of light flickered and undulated within, like a sky full of twinkling stars. Occasional bubbles emerged in the flowing golden liquid, bursting at the surface like a mortal's shattered dreams. "Top?" Reaching out to pick up the extraordinary potion of the mortal realm, the old man's fingertip lightly touched the bottle's mouth. It was like removing a seal. The wooden stopper on the crystal bottle immediately rotted at a visible speed, crumbled, and ultimately turned to dust. The dust fell into the potion and instantly ignited like a flame. Watching this scene, the old man finally opened his mouth and emptied the potion from the bottle in one gulp. "Top?" After a brief moment, the crystal bottle was placed back onto the tray. With a gentle wave, the platform carried it back to whence it came. There were no earth-shattering anomalies, nor a sudden reversal of age. Just like drinking a sip of water, the elder appeared unchanged. Only his previously cloudy eyes brightened once more, as if the dust of the past had been washed away. Unintentionally, standing aside, Erwin's gaze crossed with the elder's. Just one look, a piercing sensation struck his spirit. Bowing his head slightly, the middle-aged man remained composed. Nothing strange, this was the true power of his teacher, and the reason he has been respectful all along. Usually, to slow the decay of the soul, the old man had long been accustomed to containing his power. Only at times like this would he reveal a hint of his former splendor. Truly a perfect creation. Closing his eyes, the elder reveled in this long-awaited reign. Chapter 917, Blood of the Stars _3. After a long while, when he opened his eyes again, the middle-aged man could no longer see that captivating radiance. Clearly, the elder had already perfected his grasp on his own condition. It only took a moment for him to become accustomed to the new state. Erwin, don't be anxious. It's too rare and you are still young. One day, it will surely have your share as well. It's just that our efficiency in utilizing the raw materials is too low, and it's still far from the quality we envisioned. I understand. Right now, you need it more than I do. Nodding slowly, the middle-aged man seemed unconcerned in the presence of the elder. After all, as the other party said, he does not need that thing right now. It's just, teacher, our progress has been stagnating for too long. Wearing a troubled expression, Erwin felt somewhat helpless. Isolated cases can't establish proof, and without a reference, our experiment has hit a bottleneck. Unless there's a flash of insight leading to a breakthrough, otherwise. That's why, Erwin, I had you prepare for this war, didn't I? The elder said lightly, clasping his staff. Turning back around, the old man gazed down at the city below him. In Silver Moon City, crowds bustled about. The church, wizards, gods, angels, they were all here. As a mere human, the old man believed he did not have the power to change the course of the world. Going with the flow was his consistent principle. No matter what happened, he was never the first to initiate. For example, it wasn't he who requested the creation of the life box for Achilles, but he indeed took part in the construction and personally observed that undying body soaked in the waters of the Styx. And it wasn't he who incited those godhood practitioners, whose minds were filled only with the majesty of the divine, to demand explanations from the western kingdoms of the mainland. But when asked about the wizard's stance, all his responses were supportive. The elder himself was non-committal towards these people's actions. After all, in his view, splitting the soul meant a flaw in willpower, something he would never do. And as for the majesty of the divine, perhaps those priests never asked whether the deity itself believed the ownership of that sword affected its dignity. However, since others wanted to do it, he would not refuse. Everyone got what they wanted, so there was no such thing as a loser. But, over these years, there is only one thing that I have taken the initiative to do. It may indeed be a risk, but on the path to eternity, where is there a broad and easy road? With a serene demeanor, the elder's eyes swept over a spot in the city. There, a vitality that even he found alarming throbbed, along with 3 distinctly different auras. Such powerful demigods and the flavor of a faith deity from the eastern continent. It's a pity that I have no desire to touch that so-called power of divinity. This obviously artificial power is a last resort, something the elder would not want to dabble in prematurely if there was any possibility. By the look of things, that deity from Olympus had probably come for them. There might be some secret involved, but the old man was not interested. Let that deity harboring terrible forbidden secrets leave with them, as long as it does not affect his fundamentals. The elder has always maintained a respectful distance from such troublesome entities. Erwin, what about that wind god from Olympus? Medea is in charge of this matter, and you are aware of her attitude. That offspring of the deity said they would handle it, so I didn't interfere further to avoid conflict with her. His tone carried a hint of dissatisfaction. Clearly, the middle-aged man had been displeased with Medea for quite some time. You know, she is not only a wizard, but also a natural-born demigod. Teacher, if the war really breaks out as you said before, don't rush. Unhurriedly, the old man raised his hand to silence the middle-aged man. Send them off first, and as for Medea, don't take those minor matters to heart. Someone like her is unlikely to stand against me. As long as she's not an enemy, then don't invite trouble for yourself. Yes, teacher. Speaking softly, the middle-aged man complied. All right. Remember to distinguish what's important from what's not. The elder nodded with a smile and slowly spoke. Go on. If there's nothing else, go find some materials. The star cluster. Its natural recovery rate is still too slow. While we've achieved some results, for the upcoming war, right now, I need more. The student is still young, but that's also good. If the other party was really like himself, the old man might not feel at ease. Chapter 9:18. Taboo. So you're saying, the true name for it should be the artificial magic net. And after failing down this path, your emergence became their new hope? In the vast underground space of the abandoned urban district. Compared to before, the mental state of the god of the stars, bound by the pale silver net on the altar, had clearly stabilized a lot. Clearly, after a nearly frenzied venting, Astrius seemed easier to communicate with now. The implicit influence of a long life in godhood is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it makes the character of most deities almost unchangeable for thousands of years. On the other hand, it fortifies their will in an unorthodox manner, making it as solid as a rock. Even hundreds of years of imprisonment are not enough to drive a true god insane. Of course, no matter what, Astrius was still somewhat affected, so Zephyrus naturally took this opportunity to inquire eagerly. There were still too many doubts about what happened here that he did not have answers to. Even for his own sake, he couldn't just leave without understanding. Yes. Zephyrus, you were once a member of Mount Othries, so you should have heard about Hecate's situation. Not only his spirit, but as time passed, it seemed that Astrius had also recovered from the damage of forcefully colliding with the barrier. The resilience of a deity is so strong that, despite his body remaining emaciated. The god of the stars' voice had stabilized a lot. I know. It is said that at that time, Lady Hecate was once regarded as a being without godhood. Until the end of the epoch, she wove the magic net and became a true god with intermediate divine power overnight. Afterwards, with the power of the magic net, countless faiths converged towards her. Even today, no one knows her real level anymore. Nodding, Zephyrus was of course aware of Hecate's existence. And looking at the silver mesh in front of Astrius, the god of west wind understood the latter's implication. You mean? Yes. These insignificant bugs, these contemptible ants, they should be thankful for the grace of the deities for being able to live in this world. Yet as inferior as they are, they still dare to dream of becoming deities. The goddess of the magic net kindly taught them the secrets of witchcraft, and the deities also granted humans divine arts through the power of the magic net. They should have been grateful for this, but after somehow learning about Lady Hecate's past, these humans harbored blasphemous thoughts, desiring eternity and immortality. His voice clearly suppressed anger, but Astrius no longer madly collided with the barrier in front of him. His previous actions were partly due to long-lasting spiritual suppression and self-harm under hopeless circumstances. On the other hand, he also hoped the strength he regained would be consumed in this way. Despite the intense pain that often accompanied this behavior, the god of the stars did not care. As long as he could trouble these humans, there was nothing he was unwilling to do. But now that he saw hope, Astrius naturally wouldn't act so crazily anymore. They obtained the information, then started to verify. Weaving a magic net, shaping elements, creating the heritage of wizards, Lady Hecate indeed ascended to godhood this way. And upon confirming the truth of all this, these humans began their overreaching exploration of eternity. They studied the magic net, trying to create similar artifacts. They attempted to advance wizardry, continuously creating various new types of witchcraft. Of course, they all failed. After all, humans are so inferior, how could they comprehend the greatness of deities? Although Lady Hecate was born without authority, perhaps it was just hidden. Her immortal essence will not deceive. In comparison, those lower life forms, no matter how hard they try, are merely indulging in fantasy. With a face of approval, Zephyrus expressed agreement with Astrius' statement. However, deep inside, the wind god felt uncertain about the other's speech. These humans couldn't possibly replicate the path of the goddess of the magic net. Zephyrus had no doubt about that. But that might be because the magic net already existed, or they lack some conditions. As for whether only deities can obtain authority by doing such things, apart from Hecate herself, no one could be sure. Of course, the wind god would not argue over this matter. He just pointed at the mesh on Astrius' body, then asked, "So this is what they made, similar to a magic net but different?" "It's not similar, it's a poor imitation. Compared to the magic net that envelopes the world, it's a joke." Softly sneering, although he himself was trapped here, Astrius was not stingy in his mockery of it. "I don't know what the real magic net is like, but it is definitely not like this. It cannot gather elements, regulate rules. The only thing it can do is draw power from the outside to maintain itself. Once the source of power vanishes, it would collapse instantly. And if the infusion of power exceeds a limit, it would also destruct due to being unable to bear it. This is what mortals call an achievement. The idea of ascending to a divine position with such a creation is simply ridiculous." "You are right. It really is ridiculous." Speaking again in agreement, the wind god then quietly stayed alert in his heart. Chapter 919 Taboo_2. Listening to Astrius' explanation, Zephyrus perceives this artificial magic net as a potent cage. Now, he roughly understands why the other couldn't come out. Because every bit of divine power the god of the stars regained either instinctively repaired his own body or was forcibly extracted by this artificial magic net. The magic net itself is immensely powerful, and so is the goddess of the magic net. Yet, this so-called artificial magic net, although perhaps a joke in front of the real magic net, is extremely effective against a deity in the condition of Astrius. The divine power of an innate deity is constantly regenerating, so once this artificial magic net came into being, it wouldn't collapse due to loss of energy. And the current condition of the god of the stars dictates that most of his strength would be used to repair himself, leaving not enough to break through. Thus comes the eternal recurrence, using the prisoner's own strength to imprison himself, truly a brilliant idea. Vaguely, Zephyrus felt that there's more to it. After all, if it's just about draining divine power, there might not be a need for this so-called artificial magic net. God of West Wind believes that, even if it's just an inferior imitation, it wouldn't be easy for those humans to construct. Then here's the issue: elements bound by the magic net could be transformed into forcibly driven strength. Thus, if Astrius's divine power flows into it, would the mortals of Silver Moon City remain indifferent? That's impossible, or rather, the divine power of the god of the stars might also be what they wish to collect. The old path of ascension being deemed unsuccessful, they then use it for achieving something new, and the divine power possessed by the deities might also be part of their research. I understand now, the domain of gods is not something mortals can covet, so later they turned their attention to you, a living deity. Indignant, Zephyrus asked again. So this time, those mortals must have come back without achieving anything, right? After all, the authority and immortality of a deity are innate. No matter how much they explore, they could never truly succeed. Then he forced a smile, seemingly affirming. Yes, Zephyrus, just as you thought. They believed that they could succeed, but how could that be possible? They extracted my blood and oil, pried open my bones, and extracted the marrow within. But this is meaningless. The body of a deity is both material and spiritual, divine, and will flow through every inch of flesh. And these despicable mortals can only marvel at the greatness of a deity. He even fails to understand how the characteristics of material and spirit coexist on a single object. Then, they arranged a primitive blood sacrifice, trying to use the tentacles of the artificial magic net to sense why a deity could accept the sacrifice. They thought understanding this process would help them discern the essence of divine power's birth, then use their own methods to sublimate their magic power, or to birth new divine power. But they failed. They simply do not understand the nobility of gods. The divine power of a deity is either innate or comes from the transformation of authority and essence. Yet these ludicrous lives cannot comprehend the form of a deity's authority. Naturally, they can't observe how it operates either. Of course, they can only praise the greatness of a deity, then feel despair about their own pettiness. Rationally, Zephyrus thought the specifics might not be exactly as described. But the outcome was probably accurate. Those humans hadn't made any breakthrough progress yet. However, recalling Astrius's recent silence, God of West Wind still tentatively asked, "You are right, they do not understand the existence of gods. But after all this time, is it possible that they have gained something?" After another silence, Astrius reluctantly spoke up. He did not wish to continue, but on second thought, when eventually all gods destroy these humans, his ordeal would likely be exposed. Yes, they have. With an emotionless face, the god of the stars stated blandly. They forced me to mate with those lower life forms, and subsequently offspring were born. These blood sacrifices were also for this purpose because they gradually realized, in my current state without the stimulus of blood sacrifice, it is difficult to leave true-meaning demigods. Ah? Involuntarily stepping back, Zephyrus was shocked upon hearing this. At this moment, the god of West Wind felt his skin crawl. Although all previous revelations were horrifying, he believed he could still endure them. But hearing this now, Zephyrus truly felt a chill in his heart. Towards the Sea Emperor, the god of West Wind still had respect. But in some aspects, he felt the Divine King was more reliable. So they were trying to cultivate a powerful weapon of war they could control. Unconsciously, he might have gained many brothers and sisters. Regarding this, Zephyrus needed to be clear. No, they're not interested in that. Of course, perhaps they created some incidentally, but that was not their main purpose. In fact, initially they only wanted to explore the changes during the embryonic development of demigods, the so-called embryo, which is life not yet born. They wanted to know the mechanism of divine blood during this process, and the secrets of longevity for some non-god offspring. Chapter 920 Taboo_3. The Hecatonchires, Cyclops, sea monsters, demons, and even evil creatures. There are too many longevity men in this world who are not deities, and even among themselves, there is a centaur who enjoys a long life despite not being a god. When these humans realize they cannot achieve godhood in one step and directly obtain the secrets of becoming a god, they begin to pursue eternal life instead. And what's special about the demigods is that they are the objects of study. Moreover, as I know, even among those who claim to be wizards, demigods of the same level possess a lifespan far surpassing that of ordinary people. This is a manifestation of the nobility of all gods. No matter how much mortals struggle, they cannot possibly reach the nobility of deities. Seemingly finding a new reason to feel proud, Astrius couldn't help but curse. However, upon hearing this, Zephyrus felt a pang in his heart. Yes, even demigods are beyond the reach of ordinary mortals. But speaking of which, are there any demigods among the group of humans who captivated you? No. The answer was very certain, Astrius said. They desire the eternity and strength of gods but are also wary of the gods' might. From their daily interactions, there indeed seems to be a powerful wizard of demigod origin, but she is not part of their group. Likewise, there are a few others closely associated with deities. Clearly, although demigods are not deities, as long as they carry the noble bloodline of deities, they could never associate themselves with those lowly ants. Ignoring the drama added by the god of the stars, Zephyrus felt a strange sense of relief knowing that no demigods were involved. Well, that's good then. Without further thought, the god of west wind continued to ask. So, Astrius, did they succeed in the end? I don't know. Unlike his previous affirmative responses, this time, the answer of the god of the stars was uncertain. His withered face twisted as he struggled to speak. I don't know if they succeeded, but I hope they didn't. You can't understand. These beings who blaspheme deities blaspheme life itself, what they've done. Even the most sinful beings wouldn't commit such atrocities. These mad humans, to understand the birth of the offsprings of divine blood, they didn't hesitate to dissect those embryos. I don't know what exactly they did or whether they succeeded, but it seems they indeed discovered something. According to ancient tomes, tracing back to the original myths, these humans referred to it as life residue, implying the remnants of the life origin liquid from the Earth Mother treasure bottle. With this, the ancient gods created all spirits, and these humans, they use it to extend their own sinful lives. Utterly shocked, Zephyrus was at a loss for words upon hearing this. Life origin liquid. It has long been integrated into everything in the world, day after day powering the might of the ancient gods' divine artifacts. It's a force nearly impossible to extract, but if stimulated by the bloodline of deities, it indeed might undergo some changes under the effect of divine power. Such power, deriving from the original authority of life, endows demigods with a much stronger life essence. As long as the divide between divine persons and mortals remains, even if of the same demigod status, those of demigod lineage will have a much longer lifespan than those born of mortals. Although unclear about the specific techniques, this all sounded quite logical. But to really extract such power through this opportunity, Zephyrus did not know what to say, and all he could do was remain silent. Yet for some reason, at this moment, the god of west wind thought of the supreme ruler atop Mount Olympus. He wondered, should roles be reversed, if stripped of that eternal life and strength, what would the divine king, who stands unbounded and reigns over all gods, do? I understand. After a while, the wind god spoke. At this moment, all he could offer to the deity related by blood before him was his sole sympathy. Chapter 921. The Intrigue. Most of the confusion had been cleared up, although the truth was so shocking to Zephyrus, the god of west wind. The beings born later raised their slaughtering knives against their own creator. And not only had they done so, they had even succeeded. His mind slightly dazed, Zephyrus had lived through 2 eras and considered himself to have experienced quite a lot. He had witnessed firsthand the golden humanity thriving on earth, so devout and kind were they at that time. He had seen the deceit and lies of silver humanity, but compared to that, their power was as minuscule as dust. As for bronze humanity, they were merely tools for the deity race to test faith. When tools began to be used for personal gain and even to deceive their masters, remaking them was their only destiny. Thousands of years have gone by, with old history buried in the past. In this corner of the continent, the relationship between humans and deities had quietly changed places. They will not succeed. All the deities above and below the heavens bear witness. Even if the laws of the world are tired of the deity's arbitrariness, bringing down his supreme power upon the mortal realm, this era ultimately still belongs to the gods. Astrius, it won't be too long. All the suffering you have endured over the years will ultimately return to those humans. Every drop of blood you have lost shall not be shed in vain. With a low promise, Zephyrus spoke with a heavy tone. Just 1,000 or 2,000 years, and these humans had already gone this far. If they were to obtain eternal life, then the whole of Olympus would hardly be at peace. These wizards, they are a threat to both gods and humans. One day, if they possess enough power, even the goddess of the magic net, who granted them the ability to cast spells, would hardly be revered in the eyes of these madmen. If he were the god of the magic net, Zephyrus doubted not that even if, for his faith and interest, he wouldn't prohibit casting spells, he would definitely shackle these unruly spellcasters just as the deities do now in the real world. After all, compared to them, even those godhood practitioners from Silver Moon City who call the Olympian gods fake gods seemed much more pleasing to the eye at this moment. Ultimately, no matter how arrogant, those humans at least acknowledge the nobility and greatness of all gods, and their essence that surpasses mortals. Call them fake gods or angels, it is nothing but an internal ranking among the gods, yet they do not believe they can stand shoulder to shoulder with them. And regarding this point, except for the divine king on Mount Olympus, perhaps few deities care that they are being relegated to a status below that of the primordial gods by humans. That's good. On the central altar of the lower space, the god of the stars sighed deeply at the swearing words of the god of west wind. Now that things have come to this, he could only place his hope on someone else. Across half of the underground space, Zephyrus asked for some details, which Astrius answered one by one. Not until everything was roughly understood was the god of west wind finally ready to leave. Suddenly, as if remembering something, the god of the stars asked, "Zephyrus, it's time for you to leave, but before you go, there is one question I want to ask you. As you are now the principal god of Olympus, I wonder if in your travels abroad, have you ever heard of a human named Hermes?" Hermes. His expression slightly startled. On hearing this name, Zephyrus instantly felt a tightness in his heart. Of course, he had heard of Hermes, not to mention the past, as even in the recent books he had read, the name had been one that was impossible to overlook in the history of witchcraft. I have heard of him, a highly renowned human. What, is he also involved in your affairs? Hermes is yet another big trouble. In Silver Moon City, although the goddess of the magic net created the mystery lock, she actually prefers to stay in the stars. And the wilderness goddess only loves wilderness and nature, rarely setting foot in this city, but it's different in Athens. As a sanctuary of the goddess of wisdom among mortals, aside from recently, in earlier times, the goddess often appeared in Athens. Even to this day, her symbolic divine artifact still hangs above the gates of the city of Athens. In this context, if the great alchemist of Athens has also conducted such a bloody experiment, the possibility of Athena being unaware of it is virtually zero. No, he has nothing to do with it. Shaking his head slightly, Astrius had no idea what Zephyrus was thinking. He just remembered the beginning of his own fall to this state. That day, if he had just stayed obediently in the star realm, how could he have suffered such a fate? Zephyrus, I just have some regrets. When the upheaval of Typhon broke out, I was not in the mortal world. Yet on that day, I sensed a call coming from the god of stars. Some of my offspring, who had fallen to the mortal realm and were in eternal slumber, were awakened, but the one who awakened him did not grant him freedom. It is because of this that I left the star realm. His voice lowered, gradually becoming inaudible. The god of the stars did not continue with the rest of the content, but combining what was previously said, Zephyrus probably knew the outcome. That day, Astrius descended from the heavens. He arrogantly commanded Hermes to return the awakened god of stars and demanded the method to locate those who were in eternal slumber. If Hermes did not comply, the god of the stars would make him suffer a terrible punishment. The brusque command, the lofty attitude, everything blatantly displayed the Titan deity clan's arrogance. And then, as evident, all Astrius was met with were Hermes mocking and teasing. If Hermes, hundreds of years later, has grown accustomed to life in the human world and has become much more reserved, then Hermes, who had just arrived in the real world, was not so amiable. In another trajectory, there were hardly any deities that the famous thief god did not dare to provoke, and Astrius certainly wasn't among these taboos. Thus, after being ridiculed, the aggrieved god of the stars had no choice but to return to the starry sky. The result was that on the way, Typhon fell, his supreme power partly reaching the divine king through the effect of the fruit of one day, while another part evolved into countless demons. It so happened that Astrius encountered the newly born, corrupted ancient stars, ancient evil, star of death omens, born of the flesh of the king of all monsters. After a battle, fearing corruption like the god of sun, an exhausted Astrius managed to escape. Eventually he fell from the sky, landing in a lake that bore a name similar to his own. From that day on, this Astrius stayed here, becoming the god of the stars who fell into Falling Star Lake. Ha! Zephyrus, just a visit to the mortal world. Who would have thought it would come at such a cost? His smile was bitter but gradually, as his thoughts turned to something else, ferocity and distortion once again climbed upon Astrius's face. Hope was just a small part. Zephyrus too had to leave, and for himself, he could only continue to endure this inhuman torment. Zephyrus, it's time for you to leave. The longer you stay, the greater your risk. Go. Just go. But remember, Zephyrus, you should never, ever, ever, ever trust humans. His voice was bleak and hoarse, causing the pale silver magic web to fluctuate. Standing at the exit portal of the passage, looking at the nearly mad god of the stars, Zephyrus fell silent for a moment, then nodded slowly. Whether he agreed or not, he had to appease the emotions of Astrius. Whether humans were only capable of lies or not, was not a debate he needed to have with the god of the stars at this moment. Future matters can wait until after Astrius has been rescued. Flap, flap, swoosh. North of Silver Moon City, a desolate district where no one approached. A drab gray sparrow fluttered through the low sky, returning along the same path, trying to mend the damaged ground as the god of west wind flew out from this rarely trodden place. Without any pause along the way, only when there were more signs of human activity around did the sparrow finally stop beside the road. The magic web showed no significant disturbances, and in their capacity of human stewards, if they had altered the workings of the maze lock, it would not have been so silent. After secretly observing for a while, and certain that there was no unusual change in Silver Moon City, Zephyrus finally breathed a slight sigh of relief. With his unparalleled stealth skills, these mortals should not discover that he had infiltrated their forbidden land, but there is always an exception. Just like before, underground, he was slightly careless and stirred in his heart, which allowed Astrius to expose his location. So, in case he was discovered, the god of West Wind would have to be ready to make a hasty escape. After all, his wariness of this city had geometrically increased since his journey underground. Fortunately, there's no problem. Indeed, these mortals could not detect my presence. Nodding to himself, Zephyrus gave himself a mental pat for his excellent practical ability. Although he never scored such grades on tests, that did not affect his competence in practice. Continuing to fly, Zephyrus headed towards a more crowded area of the city. This trip could be considered a success, and what followed was how to make a successful retreat. I didn't expect that this city would hide such depravity beneath its surface. Indeed. Every place looks bright and great on the surface. Except for me, a close servant of the Divine King. Even the Heavenly Empress doesn't know what His Majesty has done. The numerous bones under Olympia, probably only heaven knows besides me. Shaking his head slightly at this moment, it was crucial to find Heracles quickly. Zephyrus wanted to leave this city. There might be other secrets here, but they had nothing to do with him. After he arranges the next phase of the mission for the great hero, the god of West Wind would immediately return to Mount Olympus. Then, in front of the power of the Divine King and the Olympian gods, the small secrets of mortals would be as visible as the moon reflected in water. However, as matters progressed to this point, Zephyrus embarrassingly realized another problem. So, if my mark has gone awry, not staying on Heracles but appearing on some unlucky sacrifice instead, then the question arises. If he is not here, then where is the real Heracles? Or rather, did he truly come to Silver Moon City? Chapter 9:22. Seeing Through. His complexion a bit unsightly, Zephyrus gradually realized the crux of the problem while in flight. He had gone through hardships and numerous twists and turns, and finally entered Silver Moon City. However, when he finally had the time to search for Heracles, he discovered that his positioning device had entirely mislocated the place. The world before him darkened. The god of West Wind was momentarily at a loss for words. Damn it, what exactly had he come here for? If Heracles hadn't come to Silver Moon City at all, was he then also secretly guessing why the deity guiding him had suddenly disappeared without a trace? What a hassle! I have no idea where I should go to find. Frustrated, a gray sparrow landed on a ginkgo tree. Its wings flapped casually, knocking a leaf from the treetop. The falling leaf drifted through the air and accurately landed on the head of a passerby. Not paying heed to this minor incident, Zephyrus surveyed his surroundings and prepared to take off again. However, the very moment he leapt, an inadvertent glance down caused the body of the god of West Wind to stiffen suddenly. Plip. Forgetting that he was flying with the body of a sparrow and not with his own strength, and the imposing aura inadvertently released by the other party during their brief eye contact, made the god of West Wind unable to react in time. The aura was released and retracted in a flash, and although it was just a momentary pause, Zephyrus, who dared not use his own strength, still fell straight to the ground, landing right in front of the person beneath the tree. The scene was a bit awkward, but at this very moment, the god of West Wind's heart was filled with surprise. After much search, little effort was needed. The one he sought turned up under his feet. Overjoyed, Zephyrus couldn't care less about the details. The sparrow he had transformed into quickly stood up and flew back up to the tree branch. Having found the person made things easier. Although his entrance had been a bit awkward, luckily, the other party could not recognize his true appearance. All he needed to do now was to follow him and leave together when he exited the city. Finally able to relax, Zephyrus felt that today was indeed a day of double happiness. He had thwarted human conspiracy and also found the person he was searching for. Immersed in the unexpected joy, the god of West Wind concealed his form among the tree leaves. Now he could start preparing for the return trip. This, Lord Andy, did you just see that? To the north of Silver Moon City, in the second ring area of the outer city. Under the tall ginkgo tree, the great hero reached up to remove the leaf that had fallen on his head. Suppressing the urge to look upwards, Heracles refrained from speaking aloud. Pretending as if nothing had happened, he inquired inwardly. Easily entering Silver Moon City, the great hero who was visiting for the first time had never seen a similar city. Clothes, architecture, the crystal screens displaying images, a dazzling array of alchemy constructs. Everything that met his eyes was an eye-opener for Heracles, and he became increasingly confident that he could find what he desired here. Yet just after finding a temporary dwelling and coming out for some fresh air, he had encountered the scene before him. On this tree, on this ordinary roadside, within this city that stood out from all countries on the continent, a deity had inexplicably fallen down, landing right in front of him. Although he flew away immediately after, Heracles was still rather perplexed. Ever since his return journey, the hero had pondered more than once about the whereabouts of the god of West Wind, and even doubted his intentions. But he had never taken the power of deities lightly. Yet the scene he had just witnessed was certainly out of the ordinary. Luckily, he wasn't the only observer. On his person, Heracles had another entity he could communicate with. Just a moment. Let me think. The voice echoed in his mind. At this moment, in the pocket on the hero's chest, the puppet holding a transparent crystal also looked somewhat speechless. In fact, the sudden appearance of Zephyrus had also given it a start. It thought it had been discovered, and that the other party was ambushing him. He was just a moment away from being unable to resist taking action. No, that's not right. I understand now, Heracles, that wasn't an illusion. It was the effect of one of your spoils of war. After contemplating for a moment and recovering from the shock, the experienced god of drama understood the situation. Embracing the crystal as large as his own body, the puppet's rigid face revealed a wry smile. It was Zephyrus, the god of West Wind. He must have been in the state of altering his physical form just now. His actual appearance just now must not have been human but something else. After all, the bodies of true gods are manifestations of both matter and energy, and their true form certainly aligns more closely with their will, but that's from the perspective of harnessing power. When transforming into other appearances, purely from a material point of view, there are no obvious flaws. If deities then restrain their divine power, ordinary means can no longer detect their transformations. But alas, since the sea adventure, Heracles has acquired extraordinary means of observation. Since ancient times in Chaos World, whether in the wilderness or the vast seas, there have often been many demons or monsters with their unique abnormal powers. Starting from the ancient titans, to the myriad sea monsters birthed by the father of monsters, and even the demons born later. Chapter 9:23. Seeing through _2. Their inherent strength might not be enough to contend with deities, but because they were born in alignment with certain special rules. In their own domains, much like Achilles and his undying body granted by the roots of the Styx River, these beings possess invincible powers akin to wielding the authority of gods. The Sphinx with the body of a lion and the face of a man. As long as his riddles remain unsolved, no one can withstand the order he has crafted. Even the most powerful gods, unless they surpass a certain threshold, cannot do anything to him. The Hydra, its life never ends. Even if defeated by Heracles, it was merely suppressed. Of course, such demons are extremely rare, and the birth of each one is a miracle of fate. The innate, abnormal powers they possess are also incredibly rare treasures. In the hands of a few specific deities, they could be used as the main material to cast a true divine artifact, or significantly enhance the power of an existing one. Medusa's petrification power did just that, strengthening the might of the shield of Aegis. And coincidentally, on this journey to the East Sea, Heracles also came upon a similar treasure. Heracles, if nothing goes wrong, it should be due to the effect of Caucasus divine eagle's pupil. It can discern illusion from truth, see the real. With it, there's almost nothing that can stay hidden from you. Of course, this ability to see through is limited, and I can't judge its strength. But at least some magical transformations are probably ineffective before it. Holding the crystalline object, Andy explained. The pupil of the Caucasus eagle. I see. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out the eagle's eye that was like a crystal ball. The great hero had used it before, but Heracles had always thought it was a tool for seeing farther, so he didn't pay much attention. Because he used it so infrequently, there were inevitably things he missed. As a result, this eye containing divine eagle's power had only revealed part of its ability just now. It allowed Heracles and Andy to see the true form of Zephyrus, but did not show his transformed appearance. Lord Andy, what do you think I should do? His eyes twinkled, a decision forming in his mind. But on such a matter, Heracles still sought the other's opinion. If it were me, I'd just pretend I didn't notice him for now. It's also quite a coincidence, you actually running into him here. Somewhat amused, the puppet could not help but shake his head slightly. In the years past, he had indirectly crossed paths with the gods of Olympus with some conflicts. But with the likes of Zephyrus, he really found it hard to harbor a sense of hostility. Creak. The side door of a temporary resting place provided to outsiders slowly opened. Shadows intertwined on the ground, and in this rarely noticed corner, Aman walked out alone. Different worlds, different from Hymenus in every way, everywhere. Blending in with those conspicuous fellows into the city, without a doubt, he should be the least noticeable one. With a smile on his lips, Aman looked up at the high tower in the sky, then glanced at the parts of the city that were hidden from view. He did not wait for that kind-hearted god who left a mark to make a move. In fact, Aman himself didn't know where the godly mark he had shifted went. But anyway, he had entered. With the other deities as cover, Aman felt that even if there were some special powers of the barrier covering Silver Moon City that he was unaware of, it likely wouldn't detect what made him different. In that group of people, only he was the most ordinary, the least noticeable. So next, he could. T.S. It wasn't easy, but finally, you've come out. I remember. Your name is Aman, right? The smile at the corner of his mouth remained, yet it was somewhat stiff. Aman turned around, looking towards the source of the voice. In terms of power alone, he was indeed very weak right now. Anyone who could silently approach him like this was surely no ordinary character. In his view, a black-haired witch was sitting on the side of the wall. Like looking at some rare animal, her bright eyes were fixed intently on Aman. Miss, are you sure you haven't mistaken me for someone else? Putting on a bright, innocent smile, Aman tried to bluff his way through. No mistake. It's you I'm looking for. It can't be helped. Who told you to be the weakest among your group? Spreading her hands, Medea expressed her reluctance. After letting that wind god of Olympus go, he would likely go find that person he was always searching for. The witch did not think he could cause any other trouble, so she did not follow. In theory, when their group left, Medea's task was over. But after some thought, the witch still couldn't contain her curiosity. Don't be afraid. I'm not planning to do anything to you. I'm just more interested in where you come from. Rest assured, it'll just be a moment. You won't remember my visit, just as if you had a sleep. How's that? If this wasn't the stronghold of the ancient gods in an alien realm, even now with almost no strength, Aman was confident he had 100 ways to get rid of this woman. But with a glance at the distant cathedral barely visible, Aman did nothing. He would just keep today's events in mind for now. The witches of Silver Moon City. A hint of danger flashed in his eyes, and Aman knew that his infiltration might not go as planned. Chapter 9:24 Flying Arrow stopped. Mortal Realm, East Continent. Clear skies and a bright sun, with not a cloud in sight. A black shadow moved from west to east across the ground. Slightly above the shadow, a pale turquoise chariot pulled by 3 Pegasus traveled through the sky, leaving behind a long trail in midair. Incense smoke rose in curling wisps, and Lachesis, leaning against the warm cushion, drew back the curtain of the chariot to gaze at the scenery outside. This was the most common way for deities to travel, but quite rare for a fate. They seldom made an ostentatious show of coming and going, as it didn't suit their character. Only today was a little different. For Lachesis was not visiting some god today, but a friend, and a friend she valued greatly at that. The cloud car darted through the sky, and the landscape gradually changed from wilderness to farmland and roads. At the edge of her vision, a large city loomed in the distance. That was the capital of the kingdom, and one of the places where the destinies of humans in the mortal realm intersected the most. Athens. Muttering this name to herself, Lachesis tapped the frame of the cloud car window. The next moment, as if some mechanism had been activated, The form of the cloud car was cloaked, and the sun's light pierced straight through the body of the chariot, shining directly onto the ground. Although Lachesis had chosen to travel by chariot for some reason, it did not mean she wanted her presence known to mortals. Especially as a fate, her presence in Athens, if known, would inevitably lead to a great deal of unnecessary speculation. Swoosh! Athens quickly came into view, and the Pegasus slowed their pace. The cloud car gently descended, and Lachesis smoothed out her clothes. In a short while, accompanied by a faint sound, the light cloud car touched down on a platform. Stepping down, she found herself on a platform hanging near a high tower. Seeing the familiar figure not far away, a slight smile spread involuntarily across Lachesis' lips. "Mr. Hermes, it's been too long. Pardon the intrusion on this occasion, please." "There's no intrusion at all, lady. The doors here are always open to you whenever you wish." Placing his left hand over his chest, the great alchemist, youthful as a handsome young man, offered the goddess a slight bow, to which Lachesis responded with another smile. Indeed, the friend the fate had come to Athens to see was not some deity, but this famously renowned human. And by the looks of the two of them, it seemed this was not the goddess' first visit. Walking into the tower, Lachesis found a seat as if she knew the way well. Her gaze swept over the surroundings. Everything was much the same as her last visit, except for a golden tray, which was different. Upon it floated an arrow, seemingly motionless. Yet at a glance something struck Lachesis as peculiar. Logic told her it was an arrow hanging in the air, but her intuition seemed to say that the arrow was flying at high speed. "This is one of my recent experiments, lady, and it seems you're quite interested in it." One hand holding a teapot, and the other supporting 2 teacups. Hermes set the cups on the desk, then personally poured the tea. The delicate aroma of the tea wafted through the air, lifting the spirits. "This is one of the results from my recent exploration of the material world's time-space rules. Based on the principle, I developed this special magic spell. I call it Flying Arrow Stopped. Quite descriptive, isn't it?" Flying Arrow Stopped? Sipping her tea, Lachesis felt the weight of the destinies she carried seemed to lighten considerably. Enjoying the momentary relaxation, she asked with genuine interest, "What does it mean, flying arrow stopped? You mean it's both moving and not moving at the same time?" "One might understand it that way. It's related to the properties of material world's time-space, and that's what my research is about. After all, as everyone knows, time-space is one of the cornerstones of the world's existence. So, to explore the mysteries of the world, understanding time-space is essential." With a spread of his hands, Hermes spoke with a smile. "And my starting point was its form of existence. Is time-space continuous, like energy, or discrete, like matter? The implications of each are profoundly different. Unfortunately, to this day, I have no answer because I can observe phenomena corresponding to both possibilities. Just like this arrow." He picked up the arrow and then let go. The next moment, the arrow shot forth as if resuming its initial motion. With a bang, it struck the wall, its fletching still quivering slightly. In its case, time-space is showing discrete characteristics. If you capture the time-space of its flight and divide it infinitely, in the smallest unit of time-space obtained, it's stationary. Just like if you rapidly flip through 10,000 paintings with only minute changes, the figures within seem to move to an onlooker. But in reality, each of the 10,000 paintings remains unchanged. This is the discreteness of time-space, though I soon realized it's also continuous. "Indeed, you're right." Nodding slightly in agreement, the goddess, truthfully, did not understand what Hermes was talking about. As for this flying arrow stopped, to Lachesis it seemed to be a very rare spell, one that delved into the domain of time. Chapter 925 Flying Arrow Stopped _2. But it doesn't matter. She doesn't need to understand. She just needs to marvel at this extraordinary wisdom. Whether human or god, Hermes always appears so dazzling. Cough, cough. With a light cough, she interrupted her own thoughts. Lachesis admitted that she might think this way partly due to the influence of godhood. But regardless, being able to touch upon the domain of time, Hermes is worthy of having his name etched in history, even though without this discovery, he remains an insurmountable figure in the history of spellcasters. Sipping tea from her cup, she observed the learned and knowledgeable great alchemist before her. Unlike before, now personally bearing the backlash of fate, Lachesis felt even more influenced by her godhood. As time ticked away, sitting atop the high tower, the two chatted casually. Until the sun began to set, Hermes finally straightened up his countenance. Observing Lachesis, who was completely unaware, the great alchemist felt a tinge of helplessness. Till now, he still didn't know why the goddess of fate had suddenly sought him out. "Lady." After pondering for a moment, Hermes still spoke out. Judging from the current situation, if he doesn't actively inquire, Lachesis might never get to the point, even if they wait a while longer. "Speaking of which, I haven't asked. Do you need my help with anything today?" "Ah?" Startled for a second, then her expression cleared. Only at this moment did Lachesis remember what she had come here for. A bit embarrassed, but the goddess glanced at the sky and swallowed back the words she was about to say. "It's already late, better to speak of it tomorrow." Lord Hermes, I indeed have matters in which I require your assistance. However, looking at the time, it's best we discuss it tomorrow." A bit speechless, but since Lachesis put it that way, Hermes could only nod. How peculiar. When he first saw the goddess of fate, he thought it was because his transmigration had been exposed, attracting her investigation. Unexpectedly at the time, on seeing him, Lachesis wore an expression of surprise, leaving Hermes utterly bemused. In his memory, the three fates from Mount Nyssa in the fantasy world had never shown a pleasant face to anyone. He has no idea why, when it comes to his transmigrated self, their attitude is so positive. But in any case, Hermes is still not keen on provoking these incessant divine beings. If there is anything that even the former thief god himself fears, it would be fate, without a doubt. Thus, towards Lachesis, Hermes has always treated her courteously and obliged to her requests. "In that case, why don't I arrange a place for you to rest here, lady?" With a barely conjured smile, Hermes spoke. He actually hoped for her to decline, but regrettably, Lachesis nodded in acceptance. "Then I thank you." His expression stiffened briefly, then returned to normal. Standing up, Hermes gave up resisting. "Well, if it's just for one night, let it be for one night." Ever since he received the message that the goddess of fate was planning to visit, he should have anticipated headaches to come. He just hopes that what she wants isn't overly difficult. But then, what exactly about him has attracted the favor of the goddess of fate? As an unconventional transmigrator, with his limited understanding of fate, he should be seen by fate as a disruptor of order, an intruder. "Lady, this way please." Ever since he knew Lachesis was to visit today, Hermes had camouflaged his tower. Although he wasn't sure if it would work, whether his arrangements could block the goddess of fate's perception of the destiny of creatures and even gods of stars, this was all he could do. But then again, his methods probably are somewhat effective. Otherwise, if she had discovered the destiny's trajectories of those gods of stars, how could he have remained at ease until today? So, adopting an attitude of what isn't revealed is undiscovered, Hermes led the way. This goddess of fate is certainly a bit odd, but in the end, for him, the various aspects of that fantasy world are only referential, not absolute truths. If even the number of primordial gods can change, what else could be immutable? Hence, although Lachesis is very different from the one in his memories, Hermes doesn't find it too strange. Perhaps in this world, she is naturally this way. After all, where he originally came from is merely an illusory possibility, while here is the real existing world. Chapter 9:26. Request. The next day, upon waking from the soft grand bed inside the high tower, Lachesis gazed at the exquisite relief on the ceiling. Her spirit felt unusually relaxed and carefree, as if transcending time. Since that fainting episode, not much time had actually passed, but to Lachesis, it felt endlessly long. As the backlash of fate gradually weighed upon her, with the arrival of night and the rise of the world's negative forces, those chaotic fates would transform into terrifying nightmares entangling the goddess's dreams. Lachesis could not remember what she dreamt, but every time she woke, her body would be completely drenched in sweat. Despite knowing that Atropos had taken on the punishment of fate for them, it was not until this moment that she realized how massive this cost truly was. Merely a slight touch was enough to make her suffer through sleepless nights. Compared to what Atropos had to bear, this was merely a drop in the ocean. Sigh. Fortunately, I found Hermes. With a light sigh, Lachesis got dressed simply and then stepped out the door. Honestly, before today, the goddess of fate hadn't expected Hermes to be so useful. But now she saw him in a new light. Hermes, a spellcaster among humans in this era, but Lachesis knew that in the original trajectory of the world, he was meant to be a born immortal true god. As the son of the divine king and the messenger who replaced Zephyrus to convey Zeus's orders, this young deity who also presided over commerce, thievery, travel, livestock, eloquence, and competition held a pivotal position in the mortal realm. He was supposed to leave behind numerous legends and endure through the millennia. Yet, under the disordered fate, Hermes barely even had a chance to be born. The misplacement of a true god was enough to greatly wound fate, and the trauma, in turn, exacerbated this disturbance. Like the first domino to fall, if you cannot stabilize it in time, the cost to salvage it later becomes progressively enormous. Thus, one can imagine how thrilled Lachesis was when she somehow discovered that Hermes had been born again. Even though this Hermes was a human and not a deity, the goddess of fate ultimately managed to use this to pacify many issues. With this in mind, and in order to uncover the secret of realigning the fate of the god of stars, Lachesis met him for the first time, and everything began to change. Though she didn't know why, the previous Lachesis had never truly endured the direct backlash of fate. However, upon her first glance at Hermes, the goddess felt an inexplicable closeness and comfort. It was like seeing light in the darkness, finding water in the desert, encountering a blazing bonfire in the bitter cold, or getting nourishment when starved. From the inside out, everything told Lachesis that the being before her was very important. Not understanding why, but this was the reality. Consequently, Lachesis chose to make Hermes her first human friend. She attempted to use time to uncover its secrets, but when Lachesis met him again yesterday, she finally understood the reason for her feelings. Since Atropos disappeared, all the backlash that had been imposed on her, all the sudden pain that descended, and all the troubling chaotic fates she inherently repelled, they all dissolved in front of Hermes. It was like encountering an unseen truth. By simply staying near him, the scenes from Lachesis's dreams could be realized. Everything adhered to its destined trajectory, and all rules were predetermined. Whether deities or mortals, there was nothing beyond order. And the backlash she faced naturally lacked a foundation to exist. Perhaps this is the world's means of self-salvation. Although it doesn't quite make sense, it's the only explanation. She shook her head slightly, not delving too deeply into the reasons. After all, fate is unpredictable, and the outcome was good. Rather than exploring a question even Hermes himself might not know, Lachesis preferred to resolve the current predicament quickly. Find the culprit and then rescue her sister. In this regard, as long as she had Hermes, Lachesis felt it shouldn't be difficult. Cough, cough. So, that's how it is, Mr. Hermes. Meeting once again with the master of the high tower, after casually chatting for a few moments and suppressing her inner sense of closeness, Lachesis slowly started explaining the purpose of her visit. Not long ago, my elder sister traveled across the continent, using her eyes to glimpse the future and guide lost mortals back onto the right path. Whether for them individually or for the whole world, this action is undeniably a good deed. However, in a corner of the Agaleo Mountains, someone cruelly harmed her. Her voice clear and melodious, although according to the rules, revelations from fate should not be shared with others. But just as Lachesis guessed, this iron law once again failed in front of Hermes. Slowly recounting what she saw from the Elder Wand, The goddess looked earnest. And opposite her, Hermes could only agree. Miss Lachesis, I deeply sympathize with you and your sister's plight. His expression regretful, Hermes then shifted the conversation. However, unfortunately, as a mere commoner, although I have achieved some success in the human domain, I dare not rashly interfere with the inscrutable fate. From ancient times, whether immortal gods or renowned heroes in the mortal realm, countless beings have attempted to know the future and then change it according to their will. Yet, despite the passage of time and the transformation of seas into mulberry fields, none have succeeded. But you are different. Blurting out impulsively, instinctively, Lachesis leaned forward slightly. However, the next moment, the goddess realized her reaction might have been too intense. This isn't her fault. Under the inexplicable feeling of closeness that came from nowhere, Lachesis instinctively let down her guard towards Hermes. However, when this scene caught his eye, it immediately triggered the vigilance of the great alchemist. What's different? Where exactly is it different? Hermes asked curiously at the right moment. As far as I know, there hasn't ever been an exception in the face of destiny. Hesitating slightly, Lachesis didn't know how to explain. But looking at Hermes' smile, she gave up on deceiving him. It's not like that, I mean, Mr. Hermes, maybe you are the one favored by destiny. In my eyes, you are the one and only, the only one in this world who can help me. Though the smile persisted, only Hermes knew that he was almost unable to maintain it. Listening to Lachesis' veiled threat, a chill settled in Hermes' heart. Good, very good. Though it has been a long time, he still remembered the first time he met her. This goddess who claimed to be the Northern Prophet came because of his experiments on the god of stars. Although that was an accidental event, Hermes had also considered the possibility of his identity being discovered by the gods in the real world. But the subsequent development changed his fixed perception of the fates. Firstly, the so-called purpose of her visit. Lachesis seemed to have come for the god of stars. Yet when they actually accidentally met, she only feigned concern for his meteor collection purpose for a moment, then immediately started to subtly probe about his origins. What does this mean? Couldn't mean anything else. He was just a person without history in this world. There was nothing about him for the gods to care about. The only possibility was that Lachesis noticed his identity as a transmigrator, and her subsequent actions further proved this. First, she ignored his meteor collection entirely, even verbally expressing willingness to support his actions. Then, she even expressed her wish to become friends with Hermes. Reflecting deeply, Hermes felt that if he were in the god's place, he would definitely not invest too much effort in an ordinary mortal wizard, unless he possessed something they needed. With that, the truth became clear. Lachesis noticed something amiss about him, and for some purpose, she did not spread this news but instead held her fire. What she eventually wanted, perhaps, was to use him as a scapegoat when needed, like today. Ha, what a joke! Favored by destiny. One and only. Only if he were insane would he believe such nonsense. Ignoring the literal meaning, Hermes felt he understood the implicit message in her words. Favored by destiny. Obey the words of the goddess of fate, and you'll have a favorable outcome. One and only. I know the secret you're hiding. You are the sole transmigrator from the fantasy world. In this world, only you can help me. Only if I keep your secret can you continue to survive in this world. Naturally, the price is your service. A mix of coercion and temptation, soft and hard approaches. Even compared to other gods' directness, Lachesis put on a genuinely sincere and vulnerable facade, which would comfort anyone's fragile heart. Hermes questioned himself, with such tactics, anyone else would have probably already sighed and become used by Lachesis. Unexpectedly, the goddess of fate was indeed so scheming. Indeed, the fantasy world is just that, fantasy. In this current world, the second-generation god King Cronus could suppress Mother Earth alone, and Lachesis was not as she seemed. Compared to the real world, the difference is simply immeasurable. Sigh. Gently exhaling, looking at Lachesis' hopeful gaze mixed with some fondness, Hermes couldn't help but internally praise her acting skills. However, the question remains, Should he agree to her now? Really? I never imagined. In your eyes, lady, I am so important. Shaking his head with a smile, facing Lachesis' gaze, Hermes confidently promised. But I don't know what abilities of mine caught your fancy, lady. But since it has come to this, it would be unreasonable to refuse. Please tell me, what do you need me to do? As long as it is within my capabilities, I will certainly do my best. Really? That's wonderful. Joy painted over her cheeks. At this moment, Lachesis herself did not know if she was happy because her sister might soon be rescued, or because of something else. On the opposite side, Hermes affirmed again. Of course it's true. I, Hermes, never lie. I always keep my word. His expression earnest, the great alchemist spoke sincerely. There's no choice, you forced this. Facing Lachesis herself was daunting enough. To even consider finding a scapegoat instead of dealing with the goddess of fate herself was already the best outcome. Chapter 9:27. Pretend becomes real. Having agreed to the request, the conversation quickly came to an end. From Lachesis' hands, Hermes obtained information about the one who had imprisoned her elder sister. However, in the eyes of the great alchemist, who the opponent was didn't matter at all. With a temperate demeanor, Hermes expressed that since he had taken on this task, he needed to make further preparations. And as a pioneering alchemist known throughout the world, he would bring out his proudest creation to solve this trouble for the other party. To this, Lachesis naturally had no objections. In the realm of spellcasting, she didn't understand much to begin with. Thus, leaving the salon for guests behind, Hermes made his way down along the spiraling staircase of the high tower. It wasn't until he had moved far from the floor he had been on that the smile on his face finally faded. Lachesis! Murmuring the goddess's name softly, Hermes's eyes began to flicker. Once alone again, he slowly calmed the turbulent emotions within him, replaying the decision he had just made in his mind. He had been in the real world for a long time now, so long that there was scarcely anything in the mortal realm that could threaten his life. Hermes also knew that the fates couldn't directly harm him, or rather, they were not supposed to directly harm anyone. As a fundamental underpinning of the order of fate, this ironclad rule would not change with the changing world. Of course, correspondingly, there was no one in the world who could harm the fates by strength alone. But this was true for others. When Hermes himself faced it all, he could not be sure whether eliminating the outsider was a violation of their own order for the fates or considered a virtuous act rewarded by the world. He didn't know, and probably the fates themselves didn't know either, since such traveling between the fantasy and the real had no precedent. But today, it seemed like they were prepared to make the first move against him. It's only Lachesis. You can decide how to start. But how it ends, that's for me to say. His stride unbroken, he passed through the archive and a compartment filled with treasures on his way down. Entering the underground space at the bottom of the high tower, everything looked as it always had. 72 columns stood there, with crystals floating uncertainly above them. If there was anything different, it was that many of the once crystal-clear crystals had been tinged with blood, and beside the 7th column, a phantom figure wandered. Lord Hermes, it's been some time since we've seen each other. Is everything all right outside? Lifting his eyes from the book in his hands, star god Amon greeted from beside the 7th pillar that was covered with mysterious patterns. As Hermes stepped into the underground space, he merely nodded slightly and then, as usual, expressed his regret. I'm sorry, Lord Amon. The environment outside is still very unfriendly to the god of stars. I've done my best, but these are not things that can change overnight. All right, I understand you. A bit disappointed but not clingy. Star god Amon had long become accustomed to this response. More than the outside world, he was more concerned with what Hermes was preparing to do as he watched him make his way to the center point of the 72 columns. Raising his right hand and standing in the center of the underground space, Hermes made a grasping motion in the air, and with his movement, the patterns on the outer surface of the surrounding pillars began to light up from the bottom, layer by layer. The last time, They combined together to transform the reconstruction and purification of elements into a weapon that crushed the incarnations of deities. But this time, they didn't invoke any external powers. Instead, something seemed to be gathering above the palm of Hermes' hand. His expression became slightly solemn. Using them for weaponry was merely a byproduct of Hermes' painstaking efforts in collecting these items. What he truly wanted to do was something that would allow him to break through his limits and undergo a sublimation back into a deity. One would appreciate the vast oceans less after experiencing the boundless seas. Clouds make no sense when asked about the Witch of the Mountains. Had he never been a deity, Hermes might have been satisfied with his current achievements. But as the son of the god-king from the fantasy world and a deity who had left various legends among the mortal realm, he obviously wouldn't stop there. Yet it was precisely because he had experienced the disparity between gods and humans that Hermes knew all too well how difficult it was to cross this chasm. Even with his wisdom and inspiration, it was only after he pioneered the domain of alchemy that he faintly saw his own shortcut. To refine false into true, one essence replacing another essence, one essence exchanging with another essence, one essence sublimating another essence. Place things of equal value on both sides of that supreme balance, then switch their positions with each other. To substitute truth for untruth, to make falsehood replace truth. Isn't this the pinnacle of alchemy? An ineffable power gathered towards the palm, and in a corner of the underground space, star god Amon also witnessed this moment. A nature beyond that of a true god told him that at this moment, he seemed to be participating in this mysterious ritual too. But whether it was his senses or something else, star god Amon only saw the brightening pillars. Those crystals floating on them seemed to have nothing to do with it. Interesting. Is this real alchemy? A moment, 2 moments, 3 moments. In the eyes of ordinary people or even most true gods, there appeared to be nothing in Hermes' palm for now. Chapter 9:28. Pretend becomes real _2. There was no gathering of forces, no special anomaly. Yet the god of stars Amon could vaguely see a portal made of flowing starlight slowly taking shape there. From obscurity to clarity, from dazzling to mundane. At one moment, the god of stars Amon even felt that this peculiar portal was about to transition from illusion to reality and fully arrive in the material realm. However, at the next moment, the ethereal gate of starlight lightly flickered, as cracks began to appear on its surface. Come! Witnessing this scene, Hermes with his right hand raised in a supporting gesture showed no panic or disappointment, for he knew very well that what was happening before his eyes was nothing out of the ordinary. After all, everything he had been preparing was still far from sufficient. Without even a foundation set, how could he expect to manifest the truth he yearned for as a reality? So with a low shout, he did not wait. As if he was holding up a heavy burden, Hermes' right hand began to slowly approach his face. Little by little, inch by inch, the distance shortened, but the deterioration of the portal continued. Time slowly passed, and just before the gate of starlight shattered, this entity hovering between existence and non-existence slightly trembled, and then became completely imprinted within Hermes' eyes. As if he had put down a heavy burden, it was only then that the great alchemist finally let out a long breath of relief. Lord Hermes, what are you doing? As though he had seen nothing, from beneath the 7th column of the underground space where he had been observing, the god of stars Amon expressed his puzzlement at the right moment. Standing in the center surrounded by columns, Hermes couldn't help but reveal a smile that came from the heart. Nothing much, Lord Amon. I was just trying an experiment. But as you can see, I failed. The device was successfully activated, but in the end, nothing happened. Feeling in high spirits and sensing the door within his eyes finally stabilizing, feeding off something of his own for the time being, Hermes couldn't help but reflect deeply. Today's experiment was not his first attempt. But since creating Amon at the circumterrestrial river beyond time and space and allowing Solomon to offer blood sacrifices on the battlefield, this really was his first attempt. It was not a success which was to be expected. After all, what he had to construct, the truth, was far from sufficient. so it was natural for it to collapse. But in terms of results, it wasn't a complete failure either. At least it lasted until he tried to bear it with his body, which was already a qualitative breakthrough. With a slight smile, recalling past events, Hermes could not help but be surprised by his own boldness and fortune at this moment. A traveler through many worlds, an apprentice in pursuit of truth. The former Hermes ignited his strength to travel and journey in the illusory world, passing through the portal that separated the present from falsehood, and successfully arrived in the world beyond the door. For him at that time, everything in the real world was undoubtedly the truth. And now, standing at the pinnacle of the mortal world within the real world, he began to reverse the process, using his own existence as an anchor to try to reconstruct that portal of the past. This was not only the path to his ascension but also his tool for exploring a higher realm. By manifesting this portal between existence and non-existence, he might ascend to the throne of God. What would he gain by fully manifesting the truth hidden behind the portal? All paths lead to the same ultimate destination. For the former me, everything in the real world was the truth. And if I could manifest all truth, wouldn't that mean omniscience, and likewise, omnipotence? Casting aside this somewhat arrogant speculation, Hermes didn't get too excited. For as he said himself, the destination of all paths is the same. Alchemy is such, turning the false into the true might reach the end of the path. But from the perspective of a deity like Chaos, haven't they also had a similar path for long? If Zeus with his sovereign rule managed to govern everything above and below, and then in turn used the power of God King to rule the heavens, then when he eventually shattered the destined fate and grasped all of the world, he too is all-knowing and all-powerful, the Lord of all gods, the King of kings revered by all worlds. It's just that he clearly cannot achieve this yet. Therefore, seeing the end is one thing, but the gap between seeing the end and achieving it is still vast like the heavens and the abyss. With a satisfied smile, at this point, the prior preparations were finally complete. After exchanging a few words with the god of stars Ammon, Hermes then excused himself. Returning to the top of the high tower, he found the Fates who had been waiting for a long time. With sparks of subtle starlight flashing in his right eye, Hermes spoke with a smile. Lachesis, I am now ready. If you have no other questions, then we can set off. Of course not. Nodding profoundly, Lachesis turned around and sized up Hermes before her. Seemingly no different from before, she wondered what he had been preparing. With this thought mind, she felt a vague sense of wonder. For some reason, at this moment, the instinct of the Fates to feel a kinship was more intense than ever. Chapter 929. Door in the Pupil. E.C. Nameless Sea. A few days ago, after preparing everything, Hermes boarded the cloud car driven by the Fates in the high tower. In another world, this common frame between the gods he had ridden more than once. But indeed, this was his first time using it in this life. However, considering that Lachesis had already guessed his identity as a transmigrator, Hermes simply gave up the disguise and did not pretend to be inexperienced. After all, at this point it was meaningless to feign ignorance. Apart from superficial compliance, in this small matter it was better to be casual. That was what Hermes thought and did. However, what he didn't expect was that when this familiarity was perceived by Lachesis, the Fate goddess had a different interpretation. Mr. Hermes, as a great alchemist deeply cooperating with the royal family of Athens, are you very familiar with the goddess Athena of wisdom? Inside the cloud car, after enduring for more than 10 days, on the eve of reaching their destination, looking at the handsome and distinguished Hermes, Lachesis still asked this question. The speed of the cloud car was not fast. As a ceremonial tool, its speed was not much stronger than that of a mortal ship. Yet, even at such a slow pace, enough time had passed for them to cross the near sea to the location of that initiator of the disaster. Princess Athena? Startled slightly, sitting by the cloud car window, Hermes slowly opened his eyes. Along the way, the great alchemist had been somewhat silent, partly because he felt he had nothing to say, and partly because of the incomplete portal entrenched in his body. As the only person in the world who had successfully transmigrated between fantasy and reality, Hermes' existence was also the only vessel that could barely sustain her from collapsing immediately. But for him, this act was like carrying a mountain on his back, certainly not an easy feat. Lady Lachesis, I'm afraid you are mistaken. I immensely admire Princess Athena's wisdom, and staying in Athens, I've also heard many tales about the goddess. But to be factual, I haven't had much interaction with her. So, if you wish to know something about her, it would be better to seek answers from fate itself rather than from me. Compared to my shallow knowledge, she will surely respond to you. Unsure why the other party asked this question, Hermes cautiously spoke. In another corner of the cloud car, having received the reply, Lachesis could only accept it. Perhaps she had thought too much, he wouldn't deceive her. After all, cloud cars are not uncommon, and Hermes might not have seen it at Athena's place. But regardless, this discovery still somewhat depressed Lachesis. Under the influence of that inexplicable intimacy, the fate goddess only hoped that he belonged solely to her. Besides that, it would be best if no other gods and humans were involved with him. Yes, belonging solely to her. Anxiously gripping the window ridge, Lachesis herself wasn't clear where this inexplicable desire came from. Though as one of the three gods of Mount Nysa, she had seen countless loves and hatreds of living beings in fate, and even with these experiences, she could perfectly impersonate another person, just like becoming Helen to deceive Paris's trust. But at that time, it felt like a player manipulating a character in a game. Although she could make the correct judgment, a sense of detachment was hard to hide. When it came to experiencing this incomprehensible emotion personally, Lachesis immediately didn't know what to do. She could only recall the various lives seen in the fate of all beings, trying to find similar cases. Possessiveness or admiration, unsure whether to nod or shake her head. Just like a girl on a suspension bridge unable to distinguish panic from being smitten. At this moment, looking at the side profile of Hermes, Lachesis covered her heart. She couldn't differentiate this emotion, and the only somewhat similar thing, however, seemed so absurd to her. To mend the flaw in fate, a life born that shouldn't have been born. The inherent complementarity, perhaps, could this be destined love? Cough, cough. Lady Lachesis, we've arrived. Ah? A light cough, Hermes's lips twitched. He forcibly suppressed the discomfort in his heart, alerting Lachesis, who seemed as if awakening from a deep dream. The cloud car had already stopped a while ago. The great alchemist didn't know that the fate goddess had just been contemplating her true destined one. And that person was him. At this moment, Hermes only felt that she was audacious to this extent. Since suddenly mentioning Athena, Lachesis had been watching him with an intense gaze, as if she wanted to devour him alive. No, to be exact, this kind of gaze had been there since not long ago when they arrived at the high tower, only now she no longer concealed it. Lady Lachesis, we've arrived. Taking a deep breath, Hermes repeated again. And this time, Lachesis finally reacted. A blush flashed across the face of the fate goddess, seemingly realizing her own distraction. Lachesis somewhat embarrassingly apologized. I'm very sorry, Mr. Hermes, just now. No worries. The important matters are pressing. Speaking quickly, not wanting to elaborate. Hermes didn't wait for her to respond. He took the lead and walked down the cloud car. At this moment, they seemed to be stopped above a large island, and a real layer of clouds separated the mortal's upward line of sight. From a high vantage point, many ships could be seen nearby, and many figures were moving around on the island. Those were the Athenian army, and as for this island, it seemed that humans had lived here not long ago. But now, looking again, Hermes could only see sites washed away by great waters. All the original inhabitants were nowhere to be seen. Considering the recent events over the ocean, the great alchemist probably guessed the cause and aftermath of the situation. This is a terrible disaster, and the source of the disaster lies with the divine king and Poseidon. In that shocking change unknown and unfathomable to Hermes, the humans on this island may have suffered terribly, swept away by the mad sea, leaving behind only an empty island. As for why the Athenians are here, It seems they plan to use this place as a new stronghold. Mr. Hermes, it seems that the human is nearby. The voice came from behind, and Lachesis' gaze swept over everything beneath the clouds. Paying no attention to the busy mortals, she stepped down from the cloud car, the fates searching for their target. There are countless mortals on the island, and searching for them one by one would be a time-consuming task. However, as Lachesis' gaze swept over the land, suddenly, an inexplicable feeling welled up in her heart. Near the only volcano on the island, she instantly locked onto a figure. It's him, Hermes, it's him. Quick, capture him. The voice was excited and somewhat thrilled to see that figure. Lachesis almost immediately sensed an unusual intuition. This feeling was hard to describe, and the backlash from fate also seemed to make this feeling vague. But compared to Atropos, the backlash Lachesis bore was far too little. Stepping forward, at this moment, the goddess felt as if her spirituality was in fear, yet also leaping for joy. Is it him? I understand now. Hermes also noticed the figure, speaking calmly. He had seen the man at the coronation ceremony of the new king of Athens. Although that ceremony was unrelated to him, having enjoyed a pleasant collaboration with Theseus, he still paid some attention to the new king. In his memory, that was a godhood practitioner with an unknown power source, apparently worshipping some deity he had no recollection of in the fantasy world. Just unexpected that the person Lachesis referred to was him. Shifting his gaze, Hermes looked at the fate in front of him. In his eyes, the gate of starlight shone brightly. Underworld, wrapped in the domain of night. Night rises and day sets, tides ebb and flow. When the daylight arrives in the mortal realm, the tides of eternal night also withdraw, returning to this eternally peaceful holy land. On a path flickering with stardust, Hypnos, the god of sleep, continues cautiously forward, remembering. Sometimes terrifying life forms approach here, yet they seem to dread the residual strength on this path, never daring to come forward. This is the outskirts of the land of eternal night, where remnants from the dawn of creation turn into real life under the touch of spirituality. They adhere to chaos and fear, silence and nightmares, following their own nature, attempting to destroy all living beings in the world. The deeper inside, the more sparse and powerful these life forms become, until crossing a certain boundary point, a place where even the pale somnus blossom no longer grows, the power of the night itself gradually thins out. No one could have imagined that at the central position of the land of eternal night, the power of the night would no longer dominate. Instead, three never-before-seen rules in the outer world prevail. Fate and karma, inevitable constants, natural order. They form a stable triangle, supporting a piece of sky at the core of eternal night. Interweaving with each other, they seem to constitute three blurred shadows. There are no vivid phenomena, no terrifying pressures. They merely exist there, as if the midpoint of the heavens and universe, the cornerstone for the operation of all things. Step, step, step. A black veil covering the face, the hem of the dress trailing on the ground. For the umpteenth time, Nyx walked into the center of her own domain. She doesn't seek anything. Just stepping in, a resonance subtly appears on her. The three shadows seem to become active, or perhaps they were meant to be active, just restrained by something. And at this moment, at least here, Ms. Night is convinced that she is invincible in the world. To be invincible in the world, it doesn't seem that hard, right, Lane? But would you desire such power? No one responded, and Nyx did not expect anyone else to respond to her. After a while, she gently raised her hand, gazing at her three shadows, and pressed her palm against one of them. The black dress shook, and the night color deepened. The power of eternal night once again dominated her domain, and secrecy reshrouded the area. Who knows how long it has been? Nyx slowly withdrew her hand and stepped back. Her breath slightly weakened, yet within her own domain, she instantly recovered as usual. From ancient times to today, all gods have their authority. And in the mortal realm of chaos, There are 3 goddesses who claim they can wield fate. But in reality, since the birth of the world, the one who truly holds fate has always been only one. Chapter 930 Sage. Eastsea. Above an unnamed island. Thin layers of clouds drift gently in the sea breeze, bearing aloft an exquisite chariot. Her gaze fervently focused on the figure beside the volcano's mouth. A hint of excitement flickered in Lachesis' eyes. "It's him, quick! Hermes, catch him. As long as you help me catch him, I'll agree to anything." Her voice could hardly conceal her joy, to the point of speaking without filter. However, Lachesis didn't mind this little matter. At this moment, all she wished was to end this nightmarish period of time. When Atropos was still around, the Fates didn't think their sister was so irreplaceable. Regarding fate, the 3 goddesses each had their own perspective. Even in their duties, they seldom acted together. Privately, Lachesis even found her sister's actions to be of no use. After all, she wasn't sure if the Divine King could bring the deviated Constance back on track. However, as the Fates, it was a certain fact that the 3 sisters had no power to directly interfere with everything in the world. Sometimes, Lachesis even somewhat agreed with her naive younger sister's idea. Just as the 3 graces were subordinate to the heavenly empress and goddess of beauty, the white wax tree 3 goddesses to the former heavenly empress Rhea, and the 3 Furies, as well as the rumored 3 goddesses of time order, each had their own principal god. Perhaps they sisters too were destined to have their own principal god. The thought was bold, but Lachesis couldn't refute her. Indeed, it seemed that every set of 3 goddesses simultaneously birthed by chaos all had their principal god. All except for them. Of course, Clotho's conjecture was swiftly suppressed. That day, big sister Atropos chastised her in anger for the first time. She told Clotho that the Fates had no principal god, for fate had no master. It was part of the world, as constant and everlasting as great chaos. Uranus could replace the sky with his name, Nyx could replace eternal night with hers. But none of these powerful primordial gods had the capability to name the great fate with their own names. It sounds impressive to listen to, but what's the point? She clenched her fists lightly. Given a choice, Lachesis would not want to be any fate. If being powerful meant being harmed without knowing how to resist, that was just too ridiculous. And what was more ridiculous was that the 3 sisters had never experienced even a bit of this kind of power. But luckily, I have Hermes now. A satisfied smile graced her lips, as a slow sense of fulfillment rose from the depths of the goddess heart. Indeed, she thought she might even thank this alarmingly abrupt change, which gave her the opportunity to discover someone so special. Hermes, he was destined to be by her side, immersed in wonderful fantasies, her pupils dilated slightly, such that standing in the sky, Lachesis didn't notice the starlight rising slowly behind her. "As long as you help me catch him, I'll agree to anything." Behind Lachesis, shrouded by the clouds, Hermes was making his final preparations. His eyes, twinkling with starlight, swept across the heavens and the earth, and before this gaze, not even the transformations of the gods could hide their tracks. None other, this was the best outcome. Still, to be safe, Hermes took a final glance at the original purpose of this trip. Upon that human, through the fractured gateway, the great alchemist indeed saw things he hadn't noticed before. Strong marks as a godhood practitioner, the source of his faith seemed to have transcended the limits of a true god. Without a doubt, another tool created by the primordial gods. Time-pressed, Hermes couldn't afford a closer look, but with this confirmation, the rest no longer concerned him. Though he came here following Lachesis from beginning to end, he had no intention of involving himself in the dispute between Atropos and the primordial gods. "Lachesis, as long as I help you catch him, you'll agree to anything I want." Standing behind the Fate, Hermes' eyes, once calm, now turned chillingly cold. In the depths of his pupils, chains dangled from the broken and battered gateway. The starlight was brilliant, illuminating half of the sky. Yet, as if existing in 2 different worlds, the mortals on the island sensed not the slightest stir. His mind slightly agitated, The chains made of starlight emerged from his eyes, silently arriving behind the fate. Hermes took a deep breath and asked one last time, "Lachesis, are you certain you want me to make my move?" Swoosh. No response awaited as he spoke. Hermes wasn't asking her. He was questioning himself. With things having come this far, there was nothing left to hesitate about. Compared to the misaligned destiny that not even the fates could correct, and the power of the primordial gods, Lachesis' threats were so insignificant. In an instant, the starlight chains, existing between presence and absence, pierced through the void, and in a flash, penetrated the fate's limbs and spine. Hardly any resistance was met. Everything was so smooth, because at the moment Hermes took action, the surroundings of Lachesis fell into a peculiar stillness, as if a frame was extracted from a film or a random page was taken out of a comic book. For the entire movie and the comic, it was almost inconsequential. But for an observer, this represented a frozen world. The latest achievement. Hermes had already introduced it when he saw it just moments ago. And now, this achievement was applied to the goddess herself. Flying arrow stopped, a kind of witchcraft born from the understanding of the world. At this moment, in the not-so-large space before Hermes, time was no longer continuous, but utterly disconnected. It wasn't about manipulating time. Hermes lacked the power to stop the time of a deity. He merely altered the way he observed, eternally placing himself in this moment. Thus, within this realm, everything ground to a halt. Only under the power encompassing the gate, Hermes' own thoughts could still move as usual. Starlight was connected to the fates, and as originally planned, the great alchemist would drag his opponent into this illusory gate and lock them under his control. Yet when this connection came into being, for some reason Hermes felt an intense hunger. As if what stood before him was not a deity, but a scrumptious feast. The flawed gateway in the eyes trembled slightly, seeming to want to swallow the goddess in front of it in one gulp. This is. With flickering eyes, Hermes was actually not unfamiliar with this sensation. Once, when he first tried to create a gate, he experienced this feeling. Hermes had speculated that it might have been because the concept of the gate originated from the portals he traveled through, which existed even within the illusory world, a world that also had all gods. So as a construct transformed from fiction to reality, the incomplete gate instinctively craved to replace the illusory with the real. But Hermes was also clear that this would not succeed. Let alone a semi-finished product, even if it were a true finished product, he didn't believe it could consume a deity for its own use. Fortunately, he never intended to do so in the first place. He simply wanted to comply with this instinct, transforming the flawed gateway into the most secure prison in the world. Starlight flickered, and the chains remained unchanged in frozen time. However, visible to the naked eye, the position of Lachesis began to slowly approach Hermes. At the same time, her figure shrank continuously, positioned ever higher. But to an onlooker, anyone would arrive at the opposite conclusion. Lachesis had never moved, and her size had never changed. This was the exploitation of space. If in the domain of time, Hermes simply took a clever shortcut without truly touching its essence, then in the domain of space, having been the ruler of travel and traversing, Hermes' exploration was unsurpassed. Movement and stillness, two seemingly contradictory aspects, overlapped here. The pupils, flickering with starlight, the broken and sealed gateway gradually opened a crack. Before Hermes, the fate descended toward his eyes, as if falling into a bottomless abyss. Creak. At a certain moment, the figure of Lachesis vanished, and Hermes, who had been tensely focused, finally sighed in relief. There was a reason he chose to act here. On one hand, he needed to confirm his hypothesis on targeting the fates. On the other, it was just in case. If something went wrong, he'd still have a chance to rectify it. His mind slightly at ease, yet after a moment, Hermes' expression became grave again, because deep in his pupils, the battered door began trembling violently. Threads and strands of black traces climbed up the cracked gaps. Like mud seeping out from within, bit by bit, outside and in. It wasn't a realistic existence, but it manifested in an expressive form before the gateway that hovered between reality and illusion. Just as the halted time couldn't affect the existence of the gate, before this ultimate filth and negativity, it was equally futile. The black mire overflowed bit by bit, descending along the edge of the illusory gate. Almost instinctively, Hermes cancelled his magic. Raising his right hand, he pressed it against his eye socket. The great alchemist reached out a hand, pulling back the damaged illusionary gate once again. With a grimace, watching the black droplets about to fall, Hermes never expected to witness such a thing. Is this the poison of fate? How can this be? How can such a thing reside on Lachesis? Isn't this the real world? If the illusory world differs from the real one, shouldn't the correct one be the real world? No one answered his doubts, but reality spoke for itself. Once detached from Hermes' body, the already fragile gate of starlight shook once more. And this time, nothing could ease its disintegration. Merging into the body meant that he had to contact the poison of fate, something only the fates themselves could withstand. Yet his creation forcibly materialized it into a tangible retaliatory fate. Without merging into the body, this semi-finished doorway could not endure. Shattering was its only destiny. No choice was correct. Every choice was just so. Or perhaps the only mistake was powerlessness, not choice. If the gateway that contained the truth had already been crafted, then Hermes, poised to reascend to divinity, would have more than one way to solve this problem. However, to the Hermes of now, this was an unsolvable puzzle. His mind raced, ideas flickered by, subsequently rejected one by one. In this brief moment, the gate of starlight incurred more damage, its form becoming increasingly distorted. As if in the next moment, Lachesis would regain her freedom. And for this, he was utterly powerless to stop. What you are doing is futile. A feeling of powerlessness surged, but it was quickly erased by Hermes. He chose this place precisely for contingencies. Yet just as he was about to abandon his initial plan, an unfamiliar voice suddenly rang in Hermes' ear. With a surge of feeling, the great alchemist looked in the direction of the sound. In the very center of the island, in a corner of the volcano's crater, on a rock, the person Lachesis was looking for sat there quietly brewing tea.